End chats at an emotional high to stay memorable. Ending a conversation at its emotional high means stepping away while the exchange still feels exciting, warm, funny, or meaningful. Instead of continuing until the energy fades and both people run out of things to say, you leave when the connection feels strongest. This creates a powerful memory because the mind often judges an experience by its emotional peak and final moment. In dating, many conversations begin with curiosity but slowly lose intensity through unnecessary replies. A lively exchange becomes repetitive, then ends with dry messages such as, "Okay, good night," or "talk later." The person may remember the boredom at the end more clearly than the excitement that came before it. Leaving at the right moment changes that emotional imprint. When someone is laughing, opening up, or clearly enjoying your attention, a warm ending preserves the feeling. You might say that you enjoyed hearing their story and need to continue later. The conversation ends, but the emotional experience remains unfinished in their mind. This can make them replay what was said, wonder what comes next, and look forward to hearing from you again. The effect is not created by suddenly disappearing, ignoring them, or using silence as punishment. Those behaviors create anxiety rather than genuine attraction. The key is to leave with warmth and clarity. You are not withholding affection. You are protecting the quality of the interaction. When every conversation ends only after the energy is exhausted, your presence can become associated with emotional effort. When it ends while both people still feel engaged, your presence becomes linked with anticipation, pleasure, and curiosity. People often miss the feeling someone created more than the person's exact words. Ending on a high note allows that feeling to remain active long after the final message has been sent. Leave a story unfinished to create curiosity. Leaving a story unfinished means introducing something interesting, emotional, or unexpected without revealing every detail at once. In dating conversations, this creates curiosity because the human mind naturally dislikes incomplete information. When someone hears the beginning of a compelling story but does not receive the ending, their attention remains attached to it. You might mention that something unusual happened during your day, that a certain place reminds you of an unforgettable experience, or that you once made a decision that completely changed your life. Instead of explaining everything immediately, you allow the story to pause naturally and save the most meaningful part for another conversation. This works because unfinished experiences create mental tension. The person may continue wondering what happened, how the situation ended, or what the story reveals about you. Even after the conversation stops, the unanswered question can keep returning to their mind. Your message is no longer just another text. It becomes an open loop they feel drawn to complete. However, curiosity should never be created through lies, exaggerated drama, or emotional manipulation. Saying something alarming and then refusing to explain can make the other person feel anxious rather than attracted. The story should feel playful, intriguing, or personal, not threatening or deliberately confusing. The key is to give enough information to make the story worth remembering while holding back only the natural ending. You might say, "That reminds me of the strangest mistake I ever made while traveling, but that story deserves more than one rushed message." When used carefully, an unfinished story makes future conversations feel anticipated rather than forced. The person has a reason to return, ask another question, and mentally revisit the moment because part of the emotional experience still feels incomplete. Recall small details to make people feel remembered. Recalling small details means remembering the little things someone mentioned and bringing them up naturally later. In dating, this can create a powerful emotional effect because most people are used to being heard only on the surface. When you remember a favorite snack, an important meeting, a childhood memory, or the name of their pet, it shows that their words stayed with you. This matters because attention is one of the clearest signals of emotional interest. People often forget long conversations, but they remember the moment someone proved they were truly listening. A simple message like, "How did that presentation go?" can feel more meaningful than a generic compliment because it shows consistent care rather than temporary excitement. The brain connects remembered details with emotional safety. When someone notices what matters to you, you feel less invisible. You begin to associate that person with comfort, recognition, and importance. This is why small details can build closeness faster than dramatic gestures. They make the connection feel personal. However, the detail should be recalled naturally. Repeating everything someone says or tracking personal information too closely can feel forced or invasive. The goal is not to prove that you remember every word. It is to show that certain things mattered enough to stay in your mind. You might remember that they dislike crowded places, love rainy mornings, or were nervous about visiting a family member. Bringing it up later shows emotional continuity. It tells them the conversation did not disappear the moment the phone was put down. People are drawn to those who make them feel memorable. When you recall a small detail with warmth, you quietly communicate, "I noticed you, I listened, and what you shared mattered to me." Vary your reply rhythm to avoid predictability. Varying your reply rhythm means avoiding the exact same response pattern every time you text someone. In dating, predictability can slowly remove excitement from a conversation. When every message receives an instant reply, every exchange follows the same pace, and every conversation happens at the same time, the interaction can begin to feel automatic rather than emotionally engaging. The human brain pays more attention to patterns that change. A reply that sometimes comes quickly and other times arrives after a natural pause can feel more realistic and less rehearsed. This variation creates small moments of anticipation because the other person cannot perfectly predict when or how you will respond. However, this does not mean deliberately ignoring someone, delaying replies to create anxiety, or playing emotional games. Forced silence often feels cold and manipulative. Healthy variation should come from living your life, focusing on your responsibilities, and replying when you can give the conversation genuine attention. The emotional power lies in contrast. Sometimes a fast response communicates excitement. At other times, a thoughtful message sent later feels more meaningful because it shows that you returned with something real to say. A mixture of short exchanges, longer conversations, voice notes, and quiet periods keeps the connection from becoming mechanically repetitive. When your rhythm changes naturally, your presence feels less like a constant notification and more like an experience. The person may notice the difference between your playful replies, your thoughtful pauses, and the moments when you suddenly become deeply engaged. People are more likely to think about someone whose communication feels alive rather than programmed. The goal is not to make them wait. It is to avoid turning your attention into something so predictable that it loses emotional impact. Send thoughtful follow-ups after the chat ends. Sending a thoughtful follow-up means returning to something meaningful after the main conversation has already ended. In dating, this can create a strong emotional effect because it shows that the interaction stayed in your mind even after both of you stopped texting. Instead of letting every conversation disappear, you bring back a detail that still feels important. A follow-up might be as simple as asking how an appointment went, sending a song connected to something they mentioned, or saying, "I kept thinking about what you said earlier." These messages feel different from ordinary small talk because they prove that your attention continued beyond the moment. This works because people often wonder whether they were genuinely heard or merely responded to. When you return later with something specific, you remove that doubt. You show that their words had emotional weight and were not forgotten as soon as the chat ended. The timing matters. A follow-up should feel natural, not constant or overwhelming. Sending repeated messages after someone has gone quiet can create pressure. The goal is not to force another conversation, but to add value to the one that already happened. Thoughtful follow-ups also create emotional continuity. They connect separate conversations and make the relationship feel like an unfolding story rather than a collection of random exchanges. The person begins to feel that you remember their experiences, care about their outcomes, and notice what matters to them. This can be especially powerful after vulnerable or personal conversations. A gentle message the next day can communicate safety without demanding more disclosure. It tells them that their honesty did not frighten you away and that the connection still feels secure. People think about those who make them feel remembered beyond the screen. A thoughtful follow-up quietly says, "Our conversation mattered enough to stay with me." Give space after meaningful conversations. Giving space after a meaningful conversation means allowing the emotional weight of the exchange to settle instead of immediately filling the silence with more messages. In dating, this can be powerful because deep conversations often continue in the mind long after the texting stops. When someone has shared something personal, vulnerable, or emotionally important, a little space gives them time to process what they revealed and how they felt with you. This space can make the conversation more memorable. The person may replay your words, reflect on their own feelings, and notice the comfort or connection they experienced. If you rush to keep the chat going, the emotional impact can become diluted by ordinary small talk. What felt meaningful may quickly turn into another endless stream of messages. The key is that space should feel safe, not punishing. You should not disappear to create insecurity, withhold attention to gain control, or leave someone wondering whether they said too much. A warm ending such as, "I'm glad you told me that," gives reassurance before the pause begins. It shows that the silence is natural rather than emotional withdrawal. Meaningful conversations can leave people feeling exposed. Giving them breathing room communicates respect. It tells them you are not trying to extract more emotion, rush intimacy, or use their openness to keep them attached. You are allowing the connection to grow at a healthy pace. When you return later with warmth, the person may feel relieved that nothing changed after their vulnerability. This builds trust because they learn that they can open up without being overwhelmed or abandoned. Sometimes the strongest emotional presence is not another message. It is the calm space that allows someone to feel what the conversation meant and realize that your words are still quietly staying with them. People remember feelings more than exact words. People remember feelings more than exact words because emotional experiences are stored more deeply than ordinary conversation. In dating, someone may forget the precise sentence you sent, but they will remember whether your message made them feel calm, wanted, understood, embarrassed, ignored, or emotionally safe. The feeling becomes the real memory. This is why perfect wording matters less than emotional impact. A simple message can stay in someone's mind when it arrives at the right moment and speaks to what they are feeling. Meanwhile, a clever or impressive message may be forgotten if it feels cold, forced, or disconnected from their emotional state. When someone talks about a difficult day, they may not need a solution. They may need to feel heard. When they share something exciting, they may want their happiness reflected back to them. Responding to the emotion beneath the words creates connection because it tells them you are not just reading the message, you are noticing the person behind it. The brain often links people with emotional states. If your presence repeatedly brings comfort, laughter, confidence, or relief, the person may begin thinking about you whenever they want to feel that way again. This does not happen because of one perfect line. It happens because your communication creates a consistent emotional experience. However, emotional impact should not be manufactured through jealousy, anxiety, confusion, or fear. Those feelings may make someone think about you, but they do not create healthy closeness. They create emotional instability. The strongest texting presence comes from making someone feel seen without pressure, valued without performance, and understood without judgment. Long after the exact messages disappear, the emotional atmosphere you created can remain. Specific compliments feel more personal. Specific compliments feel more personal because they show that you noticed something real rather than reaching for a generic line. In dating, saying "you're attractive" may feel pleasant, but saying "I like how your face changes when you talk about something you care about" creates a deeper emotional impact. It tells the person that you were paying attention to who they are, not only how they look. The human mind values recognition. People want to feel seen in ways others often miss. A specific compliment can reach parts of someone's identity that rarely receive attention. Their patience, humor, emotional strength, curiosity, discipline, or the way they make other people feel comfortable. This creates closeness because the compliment feels earned. It is connected to something the person actually said or did. They are more likely to believe it, remember it, and replay it later because it does not sound copied or automatic. Specific compliments can also reveal how you experience them. Saying, "You explain things in a way that makes people feel safe asking questions," communicates more than praise. It shows the emotional effect they have on you and others. That can feel unexpectedly intimate. However, the compliment should remain honest and proportionate. Overly intense praise too early can feel manipulative, especially when it seems designed to create fast attachment. The goal is not to overwhelm someone with admiration. It is to notice something meaningful and name it clearly. Compliments about character often stay longer than compliments about appearance. Physical praise may feel good in the moment, but being recognized for kindness, intelligence, resilience, or emotional depth can touch a more private need. When a compliment is precise, sincere, and connected to a real observation, it quietly communicates, "I did not just look at you, I actually noticed you." Shared jokes create private emotional bonds. Shared jokes create private emotional bonds because they give two people a small world that feels uniquely theirs. In dating, an inside joke can turn an ordinary conversation into something emotionally meaningful. A phrase, mistake, strange moment, or playful memory becomes a signal that instantly brings both people back to the same feeling. This works because humor strengthens memory. When someone laughs with you, the brain connects your presence with pleasure, ease, and emotional safety. If the joke is repeated later, even in a simple message, it can revive the original warmth almost immediately. The person is not only remembering the joke, they are remembering how it felt to share that moment with you. Inside jokes also create a sense of closeness because outsiders may not fully understand them. That private meaning makes the connection feel more personal. A single word can carry an entire story, making the conversation feel layered without needing a long explanation. The strongest shared jokes develop naturally. They may come from a funny misunderstanding, a harmless habit, or something both people notice together. Forced jokes rarely create the same effect because the bond comes from genuine shared experience, not from trying to manufacture exclusivity. However, humor should never be used to embarrass, belittle, or test someone. A joke that repeatedly targets an insecurity may create discomfort rather than closeness. The safest jokes make both people feel included, respected, and free to laugh. When a shared joke appears unexpectedly during the day, it can make someone smile before they even reply. It reminds them that the connection exists beyond serious conversations and romantic tension. Over time, these small private references can become emotional shortcuts that bring warmth, familiarity, and the feeling of being understood. Leave some details unexplained to spark curiosity. Leaving some details unexplained means sharing enough to create interest without revealing everything at once. In dating, this can make a conversation more memorable because the human mind naturally pays attention to incomplete information. When someone senses there is more to a story, experience, or opinion, they may continue thinking about it long after the chat ends. You might mention that a certain song has a strange meaning for you, that one trip changed how you see people, or that you once made a decision no one expected. Instead of explaining every detail immediately, you allow the conversation to unfold slowly. The unanswered part becomes a small mental invitation. This works because mystery creates emotional movement. When every fact is explained instantly, the other person has nothing left to discover. But when some details remain open, curiosity stays active. They may wonder what happened, what shaped you, or what you will reveal next. The key is subtlety. Being mysterious does not mean becoming vague, dishonest, or emotionally unavailable. Refusing to answer simple questions or constantly hiding information can make someone feel confused and unsafe. Healthy curiosity comes from pacing, not manipulation. You should still offer enough honesty for the connection to feel real. The purpose is not to make someone chase you. It is to avoid turning your entire personality into a full explanation during the first few conversations. People often become more interested when they feel they are gradually discovering someone rather than receiving everything at once. A carefully unexplained detail creates space for future questions, deeper conversations, and emotional anticipation. It leaves the person with the feeling that there is still more beneath the surface, waiting to be understood. Reuse their unique phrases to show attention. Reusing someone's unique phrases means naturally repeating a word, expression, or unusual saying they often use. In dating, this can create a subtle feeling of closeness because it shows that you are not only reading their messages, you are absorbing the way they communicate. Their language has become memorable enough to enter your own conversation. People develop personal phrases that reflect their humor, personality, culture, or way of seeing life. They may call stressful situations character development, describe something exciting as dangerously good, or use a strange expression no one else seems to say. When you bring that phrase back later, it can instantly make them feel noticed. This works because language is closely tied to identity. Hearing your own wording reflected by someone else can create familiarity. It quietly signals that your conversations have left an impression and that the other person pays attention to details most people would forget. It can also create a private communication style between two people. Over time, certain phrases begin carrying shared memories, emotions, and meanings. A simple expression may remind them of a late-night conversation, a funny disagreement, or a moment when they felt deeply understood. However, the phrase must be reused naturally. Repeating every unusual word can feel like imitation rather than genuine attention. It should not sound as though you are studying their personality or trying too hard to impress them. The strongest effect happens when the phrase appears unexpectedly and fits the moment. They recognize it immediately and may smile because they know exactly where it came from. When you remember someone's language, you communicate something deeper than interest. You show that their way of expressing themselves stayed with you, making them feel heard in a world where most conversations are quickly forgotten. Emotional messages are easier to remember. Emotional messages are easier to remember because the brain gives more importance to experiences that create a strong feeling. In dating, a message that makes someone laugh, feel understood, feel hopeful, or feel unexpectedly seen is more likely to stay in their mind than a long exchange filled with ordinary updates. People receive countless messages that sound the same. How was your day? What are you doing? And good morning can become forgettable when they carry no emotional meaning. But a message that connects with someone's private thoughts or current mood can become attached to a specific feeling. That feeling gives the message weight. This is why timing matters. A sincere message before an important event, a comforting response after a difficult day, or a playful comment during a stressful moment can become memorable because it meets an emotional need. The person may reread it later, not because the wording was perfect, but because of how it made them feel when they needed it. Emotional messages do not need to be dramatic. A simple statement such as, "I know today mattered to you, and I hope you're proud of how you handled it," can feel more powerful than exaggerated praise. The emotional effect comes from relevance, sincerity, and attention. However, emotion should never be created through fear, jealousy, guilt, or confusion. Those feelings may keep someone thinking, but they create distress rather than healthy connection. Strong communication should leave the person feeling valued, safe, and emotionally awake. When your messages consistently create warmth, confidence, laughter, or relief, your name can become linked with those feelings. The person may forget the exact sentence, but the emotional imprint remains, quietly bringing you back into their thoughts. Ask unexpected questions that linger mentally. Asking unexpected questions means moving beyond routine texting and introducing something that makes the other person pause, reflect, and reveal more of themselves. In dating, this can make a conversation stand out because most people are used to predictable questions about work, food, plans, or how their day went. An unexpected question might explore a forgotten dream, a belief they changed, a place that feels like home, or a moment that quietly shaped them. Questions like these create mental movement. Instead of giving an automatic reply, the person has to search through memories, emotions, and personal meaning. This works because reflective questions often continue working after the conversation ends. Someone may send an answer, then think of a better one later. They may replay the question while driving, resting, or preparing for sleep. Because you introduce that thought, your presence becomes connected to the reflection. The strongest questions feel curious rather than invasive. Asking something deeply personal too early can create discomfort, especially when trust has not developed. The goal is not to force vulnerability or make someone reveal painful experiences. It is to open a door they are free to enter. A thoughtful question can also make someone feel more interesting. It shows that you are not only collecting facts about them, you want to understand how they think, what they value, and what experiences gave their life meaning. The emotional effect becomes stronger when you listen carefully instead of immediately replacing their answer with your own story. When people feel their inner world has been genuinely explored, they remember the person who made that exploration feel safe. Ordinary questions keep conversations moving. Unexpected questions can keep someone thinking long after the screen goes quiet. End with meaning, not routine questions. Ending with meaning means closing a conversation with a thoughtful statement, emotional observation, or memorable line instead of relying on automatic questions. In dating, many conversations end with phrases like, "What are you doing? Are you still there?" Or, "So what next?" These questions may keep the chat alive, but they often weaken the emotional impact of everything that came before them. A meaningful ending leaves the other person with something to feel rather than something they must answer. You might say, "I liked hearing that side of you tonight," or "That conversation made me understand you differently." These statements create emotional weight because they show that the exchange affected you. This works because the final part of an interaction often shapes how the whole experience is remembered. When a meaningful conversation ends with empty small talk, the emotional energy can fade. But when it closes with warmth, appreciation, or reflection, the strongest feeling is preserved. Meaningful endings can also reduce pressure. Constantly asking another question may make the person feel responsible for keeping the conversation alive. A sincere statement gives them space to absorb the moment without worrying about producing the perfect reply. The key is honesty. The ending should connect naturally to what was discussed. Dramatic lines that feel too intense for the stage of the relationship can create discomfort. A simple, genuine observation is often more powerful than an exaggerated declaration. When someone puts their phone down after receiving a meaningful final message, your words may continue echoing in their mind. They may remember the emotional tone, revisit the conversation, and feel that the interaction mattered. Instead of ending with another routine question, you leave them with a feeling that has nowhere immediate to go except deeper into their thoughts. Emotional contrast makes chats stand out. Emotional contrast means allowing a conversation to shift naturally between different feelings instead of keeping every message in the same emotional tone. In dating, a chat becomes more memorable when it includes humor, curiosity, warmth, seriousness, and vulnerability rather than remaining endlessly playful or painfully intense. The human brain notices change. If every message is flirtatious, the excitement can eventually become predictable. If every conversation is deep and emotional, the connection may begin to feel heavy. But when laughter is followed by a sincere observation or a serious topic is softened by warmth, the contrast gives each moment more impact. A playful message can make a thoughtful one feel deeper. A calm response after an exciting exchange can feel strangely intimate. Even a simple compliment may become more powerful when it appears unexpectedly inside an ordinary conversation. The shift interrupts emotional routine and makes the person pay closer attention. This works because contrast creates emotional texture. The conversation begins to feel alive rather than scripted. The other person does not know exactly what emotional experience will come next, but they still feel safe within the interaction. That balance between comfort and variety can make your presence more mentally engaging. However, emotional contrast should never become instability. Switching from affection to coldness, creating jealousy, or becoming distant without explanation may keep someone thinking, but it does so through anxiety. Healthy contrast comes from range, not confusion. The strongest conversations allow different emotions to exist without forcing them. One moment may be funny, the next reflective, and the next quietly affectionate. When someone experiences several genuine feelings in one exchange, the chat becomes harder to forget because it feels richer than the predictable conversations they have with everyone else. Calm messages become linked with safety. Calm messages become linked with safety because people remember who helped their nervous system settle when emotions were high. In dating, the way you respond during stress, confusion, embarrassment, or disagreement can shape how someone feels around you far more than your most charming messages. When a person is overwhelmed, they often expect judgment, pressure, or emotional escalation. A calm response interrupts that expectation. Instead of matching panic with panic or anger with anger, you communicate steadiness. Your words begin to feel like a place where they do not have to defend themselves. This does not mean becoming cold, detached, or emotionally flat. Calmness is not the absence of care. It is the ability to show care without creating more chaos. A message such as, "Take your time. You do not have to explain everything right now," can feel deeply reassuring because it removes pressure while preserving connection. The brain quickly forms emotional associations. If your messages repeatedly bring relief during difficult moments, your name may begin to represent comfort. The person may think of you when they feel unsettled because your presence has become connected with emotional regulation and safety. However, calm communication should not be used to silence valid feelings. Telling someone to relax or acting superior while they are upset can feel dismissive. True calmness acknowledges the emotion first. It says, I understand why this affected you, before trying to move the conversation forward. The strongest form of calm texting is consistent. You do not become affectionate only when things are easy and cruel when tension appears. You remain respectful, clear, and emotionally grounded. Over time, that steadiness can make someone feel that being honest with you is safe, even when the conversation is uncomfortable. Help people discover something about themselves. Helping people discover something about themselves means guiding a conversation toward an insight they had not fully recognized before. In dating, this creates a powerful emotional connection because people rarely forget the person who helped them understand their own feelings, strengths, fears, or desires more clearly. This can happen through a thoughtful observation or question. You might notice that they become more confident when discussing a certain subject, that they always minimize their achievements, or that they speak differently when describing something they truly love. Gently reflecting this back can make them pause and see themselves from a new angle. The effect is powerful because self-discovery feels deeply personal. When someone realizes something meaningful during a conversation with you, your presence becomes connected to that moment of clarity. They may continue thinking about what you said long after the chat ends because the insight has changed how they view themselves. However, this should never feel like amateur therapy or psychological analysis. Telling someone who they are, diagnosing their behavior, or pushing them toward painful subjects can feel invasive. The goal is not to define them. It is to create enough emotional safety for them to notice their own truth. A simple statement, such as, "You seem happiest when you talk about creating things," can be more powerful than exaggerated praise. It shows that you are listening beneath the surface and noticing patterns they may have overlooked. People are naturally drawn to conversations that leave them feeling more aware, capable, or understood. When your questions help someone recognize a hidden strength or forgotten desire, they do not only remember the discussion, they remember the feeling of being seen clearly enough to discover something new within themselves. Ask what they truly think. Asking what someone truly thinks means moving beyond polite answers and inviting their real opinion. In dating, people often say what sounds acceptable, attractive, or easy to agree with. A direct but gentle question can create deeper connection because it gives them permission to stop performing and speak honestly. You might ask, "What do you really think about that?" Or, "What would you say if you were not worried about being judged?" Questions like these can make someone pause because they signal that you are interested in their mind, not just their ability to keep the conversation pleasant. This works because many people rarely feel genuinely heard. They may be surrounded by conversations where others are waiting to speak, correct them, or steer the topic back to themselves. When you show real curiosity about their thoughts, they may feel intellectually respected and emotionally safe. The strongest effect happens when their answer is unexpected and you remain open. If you ask for honesty but react defensively, mock their view, or punish disagreement, they will learn that your question was only a test. True curiosity requires emotional maturity. It means listening even when their opinion is different from yours. Asking what they truly think can also reveal values, fears, ambitions, and boundaries that ordinary texting never reaches. It helps both people discover whether the connection is built on genuine understanding or surface-level agreement. However, the question should not feel like an interrogation. Tone matters. A warm, curious approach encourages openness, while a suspicious or demanding tone creates pressure. People remember those who make honesty feel safe. When someone can share a real opinion without being corrected, dismissed, or manipulated, the conversation becomes more than casual texting. It becomes a space where they feel free to be fully themselves. Mention future plans to build anticipation. Mentioning future plans means giving the other person something pleasant to imagine beyond the current conversation. In dating, this creates anticipation because the mind often becomes emotionally invested in experiences before they happen. A future plan can turn interest into expectation. You might mention a place you both should visit, a movie you could watch together, or a conversation you want to continue later. Even a small statement like, "You have to tell me the rest of that story when we meet," creates a mental picture of another moment between you. This works because anticipation can be emotionally rewarding on its own. The person may begin imagining how the meeting will feel, what they will wear, what you might talk about, or whether the connection will deepen. Your presence enters their future thoughts before the event even arrives. Future plans also create continuity. They make the connection feel as though it is moving somewhere rather than repeating the same daily messages. A conversation becomes part of a larger story instead of an isolated interaction. However, future plans should feel realistic. Constantly making promises you never keep can destroy trust. Saying, "We should do that someday," without ever following through may eventually feel empty. The strongest anticipation comes from plans that are specific enough to feel possible but relaxed enough to avoid pressure. You should also avoid using future language to create false intimacy too quickly. Talking about distant commitments before genuine trust develops can feel overwhelming or manipulative. A simple future reference can be powerful because it quietly says, "I expect this connection to continue." When the other person begins looking forward to a shared moment, they are not only thinking about the plan, they are imagining how it will feel to experience it with you. Use nostalgia to trigger emotional recall. Using nostalgia means bringing up memories, places, songs, foods, or experiences that reconnect someone with an earlier version of themselves. In dating, nostalgia can create a powerful emotional response because the past is rarely remembered as a collection of facts. It is remembered through feelings. You might ask about the music they loved growing up, the neighborhood that shaped them, a childhood tradition, or the first moment they felt truly independent. These subjects often carry emotional depth because they are connected to identity, comfort, loss, hope, and belonging. This works because nostalgic memories can make people feel warmer, more open, and more emotionally present. When someone tells you about a favorite childhood meal or a song that reminds them of home, they are not simply sharing information, they are allowing you into a private emotional archive. The person may continue thinking about the memory after the conversation ends. They may replay the song, search for an old photograph, or remember details they had not considered in years. Because you brought that memory back to life, your presence can become connected to the feeling it created. However, nostalgia should be approached gently. Not every memory is comforting. A question about family, childhood, or past relationships may touch grief, trauma, or regret. The goal is not to force emotional disclosure. It is to create space where the person can share only what feels safe. The strongest nostalgic conversations focus on meaning. Ask what the experience taught them, why the memory stayed, or how it shaped who they became. When someone revisits a meaningful part of their past with you, the conversation can feel unusually intimate because you are not only learning where they came from, you are witnessing the memories that still live quietly inside them. Brief pauses can make replies feel thoughtful. Brief pauses can make replies feel thoughtful because they suggest that you are considering what was said instead of reacting automatically. In dating, an immediate response can show excitement, but responding instantly to every emotional message may sometimes make the conversation feel mechanical. A natural pause gives your words more weight. When someone shares something personal, surprising, or vulnerable, they often notice how quickly you respond. A rushed reply may sound generic, even when your intentions are good. Taking a little time allows you to understand the emotion beneath the message and answer with greater care. This works because thoughtful communication feels different from constant availability. A measured reply can communicate, "I did not skim past what you said." It shows that the message affected you enough to deserve reflection. However, pauses should happen naturally. Deliberately making someone wait for hours to appear important can create anxiety, confusion, or resentment. The goal is not to control attention through silence. It is to avoid treating meaningful messages like routine notifications. The length of the pause should match the conversation. A playful text may invite a quick response, while a serious confession may deserve more consideration. You can also reassure the person when needed by saying, "I want to think about that properly before answering." This prevents the silence from feeling like rejection. Brief pauses can also create emotional anticipation. The person may wonder how you will respond, especially when the conversation matters to them. When your reply finally arrives and feels sincere, the small wait can make it more memorable. People value messages that feel chosen rather than automatic. A thoughtful pause followed by an emotionally accurate response can make someone feel that their words were received, processed, and treated with genuine importance. Remember preferences to make messages meaningful. Remembering someone's preferences means noticing the small things they enjoy, avoid, value, or feel strongly about, then using that knowledge naturally in later conversations. In dating, this can make messages feel deeply personal because it shows that you are not speaking to them the way you speak to everyone else. A preference may be as simple as their favorite drink, the type of music they play when stressed, the food they dislike, or whether they prefer quiet places to crowded ones. When you remember these details, your messages begin to reflect who they actually are. This works because people feel emotionally valued when their individuality is remembered. A message like, "I saw that little bookstore you would probably love," feels more meaningful than a generic "thinking of you." It shows that your attention has become connected to their personality, not only their appearance or availability. Preferences also create emotional continuity. When something they mentioned days ago appears naturally in a later conversation, it proves that their words did not disappear. The person may feel that you carry a small mental picture of them even when you are apart. However, remembering preferences should never feel like collecting data. Repeating too many details or using them to impress someone can feel calculated. The strongest effect comes when the reference is subtle, relevant, and sincere. It is also important to respect changing preferences. People grow, moods shift, and what someone enjoyed before may not always fit them now. Attention should remain curious rather than rigid. When you remember what makes someone comfortable, excited, or understood, your messages stop feeling random. They begin to feel intentionally shaped around the person receiving them, which can make even a simple text carry surprising emotional weight. Voice notes can feel warmer than long texts. Voice notes can feel warmer than long texts because they carry tone, rhythm, hesitation, laughter, and emotion in a way written words often cannot. In dating, hearing someone's voice can make a conversation feel more personal, immediate, and human. A simple sentence may feel ordinary in text, but intimate when spoken with sincerity. This works because the voice reveals emotional detail. A soft pause can show thoughtfulness. A quiet laugh can create playfulness. A calm tone can make someone feel reassured. These subtle signals help the other person understand not only what you mean, but how you feel while saying it. Voice notes can also reduce misunderstandings. Text can easily sound colder, sharper, or more serious than intended. When someone hears your natural tone, they are less likely to misread your emotion. This can make difficult or meaningful conversations feel safer. The strongest voice notes are usually natural and focused. They do not need to sound polished or rehearsed. In fact, small imperfections often make them feel more genuine. A warm, spontaneous message can create the sense that you wanted the person to hear your voice, not just read another notification. However, voice notes should not become overwhelming. Sending long recordings without considering the other person's time can feel demanding. It is also important to notice whether they enjoy this form of communication. Some people prefer text, especially when they are busy or value privacy. A well-timed voice note can stay with someone because your voice becomes attached to a specific emotion. They may replay it later, not for the words alone, but for the feeling carried in the way you said them. Gentle unpredictability keeps conversations interesting. Gentle unpredictability means bringing natural variety into the way you communicate without making the other person feel confused or emotionally unsafe. In dating, conversations become more engaging when every message does not follow the same routine, tone, or pattern. You might sometimes send a thoughtful question, sometimes a playful observation, and sometimes a short voice note that feels spontaneous. One day, the conversation may be light and funny. Another day, it may become reflective and personal. This variation keeps the interaction mentally fresh because the other person cannot predict every emotional turn. The brain pays closer attention to experiences that contain small surprises. When your messages occasionally introduce something unexpected but relevant, they stand out from ordinary conversations. A strange question, a remembered detail, or an unplanned compliment can interrupt routine thinking and make the person pause. However, unpredictability should never mean inconsistency, emotional withdrawal, or sudden coldness. Switching between intense affection and distance may create obsession, but it does so through anxiety. That is not healthy attraction. Gentle unpredictability keeps the content fresh, while your respect, honesty, and emotional steadiness remain consistent. The strongest effect comes from contrast without confusion. You can be reliable without becoming repetitive. The person should trust your character even if they cannot predict every message. When conversations feel too scripted, attention begins to fade. But when your communication includes warmth, humor, curiosity, and occasional surprise, the other person remains emotionally present. They may find themselves wondering what you will say next, not because they fear losing you, but because interacting with you feels alive, layered, and different from the predictable exchanges they have with everyone else. Be warm without revealing everything immediately. Being warm without revealing everything immediately means showing genuine interest, kindness, and emotional openness while still allowing your personality to unfold gradually. In dating, this balance can create stronger curiosity because the other person feels welcomed without feeling as though they already know your entire story. Warmth makes people feel safe. It appears in the way you listen, respond, remember details, and show sincere interest. But when every memory, fear, dream, and personal experience is shared too quickly, the connection can lose its natural sense of discovery. This works because attraction often grows through gradual understanding. Each conversation reveals another layer, giving the other person something new to notice. They may begin wondering what shaped you, what matters to you, and what parts of your personality have not yet appeared. The key is not secrecy. Refusing simple questions, hiding important facts, or acting emotionally unavailable can create distrust. Healthy mystery comes from pacing. You answer honestly, but you do not force deep intimacy before enough trust has formed. Sharing gradually also protects emotional boundaries. Early excitement can make people reveal more than they are ready to hold later. When you slow the process, you give both people time to decide whether the connection is safe, mutual, and genuine. Warmth should remain consistent even when some details stay private. The other person should feel that you are present, not evasive. A calm smile in your words, a thoughtful reply, or a small personal story can offer closeness without giving away everything at once. People often think more about someone when they sense there is still more to discover. Warmth draws them closer, while gradual disclosure keeps the connection emotionally alive. Develop a distinct texting style. Developing a distinct texting style means communicating in a way that feels naturally recognizable as yours. In dating, this can make your messages more memorable because people begin associating certain expressions, rhythms, jokes, and emotional tones with your presence. A distinct style may appear in the questions you ask, the way you tell stories, the phrases you use, or how you balance humor with sincerity. You might be known for thoughtful observations, playful comparisons, short voice notes, or messages that make ordinary moments feel interesting. Over time, the person can recognize your energy before fully processing the words. This works because familiarity strengthens emotional association. When your communication has a consistent personality, your messages do not blend into the countless predictable texts someone receives. Your name becomes connected to a particular feeling, whether that feeling is warmth, curiosity, calmness, or laughter. However, a distinct style should grow from who you genuinely are. Copying popular lines, forcing mysterious language, or adopting a personality designed only to impress can make your messages feel artificial. The goal is not to create a character. It is to express your real personality clearly enough that it becomes memorable. Consistency matters, but repetition should be avoided. Using the same joke, greeting, or compliment every day can quickly lose its effect. Your emotional tone can remain recognizable while the content continues to change. A strong texting style also respects the other person's communication preferences. Being distinct does not mean dominating every exchange or refusing to adapt. It means bringing your personality into the conversation while still creating room for theirs. When someone begins seeing a certain phrase, observation, or type of humor and immediately thinks of you, your communication has developed an emotional signature that stays active even when you are not texting. Ask for their view to show respect. Asking for someone's view means inviting them to share how they understand a situation instead of assuming your perspective is the only one that matters. In dating, this can create a strong emotional connection because people feel valued when their thoughts are treated with genuine interest. You might ask what they think about a difficult choice, how they would handle a situation, or what something means to them personally. These questions communicate that you see them as someone with depth, judgment, and experiences worth hearing. This works because respect creates emotional safety. Many people are used to conversations where others wait for their turn to speak, dismiss unfamiliar opinions, or turn every topic into a debate. When you ask for their perspective and listen carefully, the conversation feels different. They begin to feel that their mind matters to you. The strongest effect comes when you remain curious, even if you disagree. Asking for someone's opinion only to correct, mock, or challenge them immediately can feel like a trap. Genuine respect means allowing them to explain how they reached their view before deciding how you want to respond. Their answer may reveal values, fears, priorities, and personal experiences that ordinary questions would never uncover. You begin learning not just what they believe, but why they believe it. This can create a deeper understanding of who they are beneath surface-level attraction. However, asking for their view should not become constant approval-seeking. You can value their perspective without abandoning your own judgment. Healthy connection allows both people to speak honestly. People remember those who make them feel intellectually respected. When someone realizes that you are not only interested in their appearance or attention, but also in how their mind works, your conversations begin carrying a depth that is difficult to replace. Revisit earlier topics to create continuity. Revisiting earlier topics means returning naturally to something the other person mentioned in a previous conversation. In dating, this creates continuity because it shows that your connection does not reset every time the chat ends. Their words remain part of an ongoing emotional story. You might ask how a family situation developed, whether they finished the book they mentioned, or what happened with a decision they were struggling to make. A simple follow-up can feel unexpectedly meaningful because it proves that you were listening beyond the moment. This works because continuity creates emotional security. Many conversations feel temporary. People share something personal, receive a quick response, and never hear about it again. When you return to the subject later, they feel remembered rather than merely entertained. Earlier topics also create depth. Each conversation builds on what came before, allowing the connection to grow instead of repeating the same introductions, jokes, and surface-level questions. The person begins to feel that you understand their life as a developing story, not a collection of isolated facts. However, the topic should be revisited with sensitivity. Bringing up something painful, private, or unresolved without considering their comfort may feel intrusive. A gentle approach gives them control, such as saying, "You mentioned that situation before. How are you feeling about it now?" The strongest effect comes when the follow-up is specific and sincere. It should not sound like you are checking a box or proving how much you remember. It should reflect genuine curiosity about what mattered to them. When someone realizes that previous conversations still exist in your mind, the connection feels more stable. Your messages become linked together by memory, attention, and emotional consistency, making the relationship feel as though it is quietly moving forward. Slight ambiguity can keep messages. Replaying. Slight ambiguity means phrasing a message in a way that carries more than one possible meaning without becoming confusing or dishonest. In dating, this can make a conversation more memorable because the other person may continue wondering what you truly meant, how serious you were, or whether there was a deeper feeling beneath the words. A message like, "You are more interesting than I expected," can sound playful, flattering, and slightly mysterious at the same time. The person may smile, reread it, and wonder what changed your perception. The message stays active because it does not explain everything immediately. This works because the brain naturally tries to complete uncertain meaning. Clear information is processed and released, but a lightly open-ended message may return to the mind. The person may examine the wording, your tone, and the conversation around it to understand the emotion more fully. However, ambiguity should remain gentle. It should never involve mixed signals, false promises, hidden threats, or deliberate emotional confusion. Saying affectionate things and then denying their meaning can create insecurity rather than healthy curiosity. The goal is to leave room for interpretation, not to make someone doubt where they stand. The strongest ambiguous messages still contain warmth. They suggest interest while allowing the connection to unfold naturally. A playful observation, a layered compliment, or a sentence that hints at a future conversation can create intrigue without withholding basic honesty. Tone and timing matter. Ambiguity works best when trust already exists and the other person understands your personality. Used too often, it can feel evasive. Used occasionally, it adds emotional texture. People often replay messages when they sense there is more beneath the surface. A little uncertainty can keep your words alive, as long as the person still feels respected, secure, and free to ask what you meant. A welcomed nickname strengthens emotional association. A welcomed nickname strengthens emotional association because it gives the relationship a small piece of language that feels personal. In dating, a nickname can become more than a label. It can carry warmth, humor, affection, and shared meaning, especially when it develops naturally from a private moment or recognizable trait. This works because the brain forms strong connections between words and feelings. When a nickname is used during playful, comforting, or emotionally significant conversations, the person begins associating that name with the way you make them feel. Hearing it later can instantly bring back the same sense of closeness. A nickname may come from an inside joke, a harmless habit, a favorite phrase, or a memorable story. Because it is connected to something specific, it feels more intimate than a generic term of affection. It quietly communicates, "I noticed something unique about you that has become meaningful to me." The most important word is welcomed. A nickname should never embarrass, reduce, sexualize, or target an insecurity. Even a name intended as playful can feel disrespectful if the other person dislikes it. Emotional closeness grows when someone feels understood, not when they feel forced to tolerate a label. The strongest nicknames are introduced gently and allowed to develop through mutual comfort. If the person laughs, repeats it, or begins using one for you, the nickname may become part of your shared communication. Over time, it can function like an emotional shortcut. A single word may recall an entire conversation, a funny mistake, or a moment of unexpected tenderness. When that nickname appears on their screen, it can make your message feel familiar before they even read the rest, linking your presence with a private sense of recognition and belonging. Say, when something reminded you of them. Saying when something reminded you of someone means letting them know they entered your thoughts during an ordinary moment. In dating, this can feel deeply personal because it shows that your connection exists beyond active conversation. They were present in your mind even when they were not asking for attention. You might hear a song they mentioned, see a place they would enjoy, notice a strange joke that matches their humor, or come across something connected to a past conversation. A simple message like, "I saw this and immediately thought of you," can carry more emotional weight than a generic greeting. This works because people want to know they are memorable. When something in your daily life naturally brings them to mind, it suggests that their personality has created an association within you. They are no longer limited to a chat window. Parts of the outside world have begun connecting back to them. The strongest messages are specific. Saying exactly what reminded you of them makes the thought feel genuine rather than copied. It shows that you remember their interests, habits, stories, or unique way of seeing things. However, these messages should not be constant or exaggerated. Claiming that everything reminds you of someone can feel forced, especially early in dating. The emotional effect comes from rarity and sincerity, not repetition. It is also important that the connection feels positive. Mentioning something that targets an insecurity or uncomfortable memory can have the opposite effect. The reminder should make them feel noticed, understood, or warmly remembered. When someone realizes they appeared in your mind without prompting, they may begin wondering when else you think about them. The message creates a quiet feeling of presence, making them feel that they have already left a small mark on your everyday life. Break routine. Thinking with unusual messages. Breaking routine thinking means sending something that interrupts the predictable pattern of ordinary conversation. In dating, most people receive the same questions repeatedly. How was your day? What are you doing? Or, have you eaten? These messages are not wrong, but they often pass through the mind without creating much emotional impact. An unusual message makes the other person pause. It might be a strange observation, a playful choice, an unexpected question, or a vivid thought connected to their personality. You could ask which memory they would relive for 1 hour, what fictional place they would disappear into for a weekend, or what ordinary thing instantly improves their mood. This works because the brain notices novelty. When a message feels different from the usual pattern, attention increases. The person may think longer before replying, imagine possibilities, or continue reflecting after the conversation ends. Your message becomes connected to mental stimulation rather than routine obligation. The strongest unusual messages still feel relevant. Randomness alone does not create connection. A strange question becomes meaningful when it reflects something you know about the person or opens a side of them that ordinary texting rarely reaches. However, unusual messages should never feel disturbing, invasive, or emotionally confusing. The goal is to create curiosity, not discomfort. They should invite imagination while respecting boundaries. Timing also matters. A playful message may work well during a relaxed moment, but feel insensitive during stress or sadness. Emotional awareness keeps novelty from becoming careless. When your messages occasionally make someone stop, smile, imagine, or reconsider something, your conversations begin to stand apart. You are no longer another predictable notification. You become associated with moments that wake up their mind and make ordinary texting feel unexpectedly alive. Short, precise messages often hit harder. Short, precise messages often hit harder because they remove everything unnecessary and leave only the emotional core. In dating, people sometimes over-explain because they want to be understood perfectly. But too many words can weaken a strong feeling, making an honest message sound rehearsed, anxious, or less confident. A simple line like, "I liked hearing your voice tonight," can feel more powerful than a long paragraph explaining every reason why. The message lands quickly, creates a clear emotion, and gives the other person space to feel its meaning. This works because the brain pays attention to clarity. When a message is direct, the person does not have to search through unnecessary details to understand what matters. The words feel deliberate, as though each one was chosen for a reason. Short messages can also appear more emotionally confident. They communicate interest without demanding reassurance. A clear compliment, thoughtful observation, or sincere statement can stay in someone's mind because it feels complete without trying too hard. However, short should not mean cold. Replies like, "Okay," "fine," or "cool" may feel dismissive when the conversation deserves warmth. The power comes from emotional accuracy, not simply using fewer words. Timing also matters. A brief message sent after a meaningful conversation can echo more strongly than another long exchange. It may be reread because its meaning feels concentrated rather than diluted. People often remember the sentence that captured exactly what they needed to hear. When your words are warm, honest, and precise, they can create more impact than a message filled with explanations, giving the other person one clear emotional thought to carry with them. People remember feeling deeply understood. People remember feeling deeply understood because genuine understanding is rare. In dating, many conversations stay on the surface. People exchange facts, jokes, and compliments, but still leave feeling unseen. The moment someone recognizes the emotion beneath their words can create a much stronger bond. Deep understanding begins with listening beyond the literal message. Someone may say they are fine while sounding disappointed, or laugh while describing something that clearly hurt them. When you notice the hidden feeling without forcing it, you show emotional awareness. A response like, "It sounds as though you are more disappointed than angry," can make someone pause. It gives language to an emotion they may not have fully understood themselves. That moment can feel intimate because the person realizes you are not only hearing what they say, you are noticing what they struggle to express. This works because people naturally remember those who reduce their sense of loneliness. Feeling understood can create relief, especially for someone who is used to being dismissed, misunderstood, or told they are overreacting. Your message becomes connected to emotional safety. However, understanding should not become assumption. Telling someone how they feel with too much certainty can feel controlling or invasive. The strongest approach leaves room for correction. "I may be wrong, but it sounds like that really affected you." It is also important not to rush into advice. Sometimes people do not need a solution. They need someone to recognize the weight of what happened. When a person feels accurately understood without being judged, they may replay the conversation later. They remember the rare experience of not having to explain every hidden part of themselves before someone finally noticed. Respond to the emotion beneath their words. Responding to the emotion beneath someone's words means noticing what they are truly feeling, not just reacting to the sentence they typed. In dating, people often communicate indirectly. They may say, It's not a big deal, while feeling disappointed or joke about something that actually hurt them. The deeper emotion is often hidden beneath casual language. When you respond only to the surface, the person may feel unheard. But when you gently acknowledge the feeling underneath, the conversation becomes more intimate. A message like, "That sounds more frustrating than you're letting on," can make someone feel recognized without forcing them to reveal more than they are ready to share. This works because emotional recognition creates safety. People often soften when they realize they do not have to explain every detail before being understood. Your response shows that you are paying attention to tone, context, and emotional shifts, not just words. However, you should never act as though you know their feelings better than they do. Emotional awareness is not mind reading. The strongest approach is gentle and open, such as, "I may be wrong, but it sounds like that really affected you." This gives them room to agree, correct you, or stay private. It is also important not to rush into advice. A person may need comfort before solutions. Sometimes saying, "I understand why that hurt," creates more connection than offering 5 ways to fix the problem. When someone feels emotionally understood, they remember the conversation differently. They remember that you noticed what others might have missed, and that your presence made it safer to be honest. Share small truths to invite openness. Sharing small truths means revealing honest parts of yourself without overwhelming the conversation. In dating, openness often grows through emotional permission. When you share something real, the other person may feel safer doing the same because the interaction no longer feels like a performance. A small truth might be admitting that you were nervous before an important event, that you sometimes overthink simple situations, or that a certain memory still affects you. These details show humanity without demanding immediate intimacy. They communicate that you are willing to be seen as imperfect. This works because vulnerability often invites vulnerability. When one person lowers their emotional guard slightly, the other may feel less pressure to appear flawless. The conversation becomes more balanced, honest, and emotionally alive. However, the truth should match the level of trust. Revealing extremely personal pain too early can create pressure or make the other person feel responsible for emotions they are not prepared to hold. Healthy openness develops gradually. The strongest small truths are relevant to the conversation. They should not feel like sudden confessions designed to force closeness. A simple statement such as, "I act calm, but situations like that make me nervous too," can create more connection than a dramatic disclosure. It is also important to share without expecting equal vulnerability in return. Openness should be an invitation, not a test. The other person should remain free to reveal only what feels comfortable. When you share a sincere truth with emotional steadiness, you show that honesty does not have to be frightening. The person may begin to trust that they can speak more freely around you, making the conversation feel less guarded and more genuinely human. Create vivid images through your wording. Creating vivid images through your wording means describing thoughts, memories, or feelings in a way that allows the other person to picture them clearly. In dating, this can make your messages more memorable because the mind responds strongly to scenes it can almost see, hear, or feel. Instead of saying, "I had a peaceful evening," you might describe the rain tapping against the window, the room becoming quiet, and a song playing softly in the background. The message becomes more than information. It becomes a small experience the other person can enter. This works because imagery activates imagination. When someone can picture what you are describing, they become more emotionally involved in the conversation. Your words begin creating scenes inside their mind, and those scenes can remain even after the chat ends. Vivid language can also make attraction feel more personal. Saying, "You looked nice," is pleasant, but saying, "You had the kind of smile that made the whole room feel lighter," creates a stronger emotional picture. The person may replay the moment because your wording gave it shape. However, vivid language should still sound natural. Too much dramatic description can feel rehearsed, exaggerated, or insincere. The goal is not to turn every message into poetry. It is to choose a few clear details that make the emotion easier to feel. Sensory words are especially powerful. Mentioning warmth, sound, movement, light, or atmosphere helps the message feel real. When your words create a scene rather than simply reporting an event, the person becomes more mentally present. People often forget plain facts, but they remember images. A message that places a clear picture in someone's mind can quietly stay there. bringing your voice and emotional presence back whenever that image returns. Personal humor is more memorable than random jokes. Personal humor is more memorable than random jokes because it connects laughter to something specific about the other person. In dating, a generic joke may be funny for a moment, but humor built around their habits, stories, personality, or shared experiences feels more intimate. You might gently reference the way they always overpack, how seriously they defend a favorite food, or the funny expression they use when something goes wrong. Because the joke belongs to your shared understanding, it carries more emotional meaning than something copied from the internet. This works because personalized humor makes people feel noticed. It shows that you are paying attention closely enough to find comedy in the details of who they are. The laughter becomes connected not just to the joke, but to the feeling of being known. It also strengthens memory through association. A phrase, object, or situation may later remind them of the joke and bring your conversation back into their mind. What began as a playful message can become a private reference that continues growing over time. However, personal humor must remain kind. Joking about insecurities, appearance, trauma, or something they have trusted you with can create embarrassment rather than closeness. The strongest humor makes someone feel included, not exposed. Timing matters as well. A joke that fits the mood can create relief and warmth, while humor used during a serious moment may feel dismissive. Emotional awareness keeps playfulness from becoming careless. When someone laughs because you noticed a harmless detail that only the two of you understand, the moment feels more personal. Random jokes entertain. Personal humor creates recognition, shared language, and the feeling that your conversations have a character of their own. Move beyond basic daily updates. Moving beyond basic daily updates means allowing conversations to explore more than work, meals, errands, and routine plans. In dating, messages like, "How was your day?" or "What are you doing?" can keep contact alive, but they rarely create the emotional depth that makes someone think about you later. Daily updates tell you what happened. Deeper questions reveal what the experience meant. Instead of only asking whether work was stressful, you might ask which moment drained them most, what made them laugh unexpectedly, or what they wish had gone differently. This shifts the conversation from reporting events to sharing inner reactions. The effect is powerful because people remember conversations that help them feel known beneath their routine. Most of their day may be filled with practical exchanges, quick replies, and surface-level attention. When you ask about what inspired, frustrated, surprised, or changed them, the interaction begins to feel emotionally different. Moving deeper does not mean turning every chat into an intense discussion. Constant seriousness can become exhausting. The strongest conversations balance ordinary updates with curiosity, humor, reflection, and emotional awareness. The timing also matters. If someone is tired or busy, a simple message may be more appropriate than a deep question. Emotional intelligence means recognizing when to explore and when to keep things light. You can also move beyond routine by sharing your own observations instead of listing events. Rather than saying, "Today was busy," explain the moment that stayed with you and why. When conversations reveal how someone experiences life, not just what they do each day, the connection becomes harder to replace. They begin associating you with a rare space where their thoughts, emotions, and hidden reactions are welcomed. Ask questions others rarely ask. Asking questions others rarely ask means moving beyond predictable conversation and showing interest in parts of someone that are usually overlooked. In dating, most people ask about work, hobbies, family, or weekend plans. Those questions are useful, but they often produce rehearsed answers that reveal very little emotion. Rare questions interrupt that pattern. You might ask what kind of compliment they secretly remember, which version of themselves they miss, what ordinary moment makes them feel most alive, or what belief they had to unlearn. These questions invite reflection instead of automatic replies. This works because people are drawn to conversations that help them explore themselves. When someone has to pause before answering, the question begins creating an internal experience. They may search through memories, reconsider old feelings, or notice something about themselves they had never named clearly. Because you introduced that reflection, your presence can become linked to the discovery. The person may think about the question hours later, improve their answer in their mind, or return because the conversation feels unfinished. However, rare questions should not become intrusive. Asking about trauma, painful relationships, or private insecurities before trust exists can feel emotionally aggressive. The goal is not to force vulnerability, it is to create curiosity while respecting the person's right to remain private. The strongest unusual questions feel relevant to the moment. They should grow naturally from what the person has already shared rather than appearing like an interview script. When someone realizes that you are curious about parts of them most people never notice, the interaction feels different. They are no longer repeating familiar facts. They are revealing an inner world, and your question becomes the doorway that helped them enter it. Genuine curiosity makes people feel interesting. Genuine curiosity makes people feel interesting because it communicates that their thoughts, experiences, and emotions are worth exploring. In dating, many people are used to conversations where questions are asked only out of politeness or as a way to wait for a turn to speak. Real curiosity feels different because it stays focused on the person. When someone mentions a hobby, unusual opinion, childhood memory, or personal ambition, genuine curiosity follows the detail instead of changing the subject. You might ask what first drew them to it, how it changed them, or what most people misunderstand about it. These questions show that you are not simply collecting facts. You want to understand the meaning behind them. This works because attention can change how people experience themselves. When someone listens with interest, ordinary parts of a person's life can begin to feel valuable. They may become more expressive, reveal forgotten stories, or notice qualities in themselves they had previously dismissed. The emotional effect becomes stronger when you remember their answers later. A thoughtful follow-up shows that your curiosity was not temporary. It tells them the conversation stayed with you. However, genuine curiosity should never feel like an interview. Asking question after question without sharing anything about yourself can create pressure. Healthy connection involves mutual openness, natural pauses, and room for both people to contribute. Curiosity also requires accepting answers that are different from what you expected. If you only seem interested when someone agrees with you or fits your assumptions, the attention begins to feel conditional. People often think about those who make them feel more alive while speaking. When your interest helps someone feel that their inner world is worth hearing, they may associate your presence with the rare experience of feeling genuinely fascinating rather than merely observed. Praise their judgment, not only appearance. Praising someone's judgment means recognizing the quality of their decisions, instincts, or way of understanding situations instead of focusing only on how they look. In dating, appearance-based compliments may feel good for a moment, but praise connected to someone's mind often reaches deeper. You might tell them they handled a difficult situation with maturity, made a thoughtful choice, or noticed something others missed. This kind of compliment communicates that you value how they think, not just how they appear. This works because judgment is tied to identity. People want to feel capable, perceptive, and trusted. When you acknowledge their reasoning, they may feel respected in a way ordinary compliments rarely create. The praise becomes more believable because it is connected to something they actually did. It can also make someone feel emotionally safer around you. They begin to understand that your interest is not shallow or dependent on appearance. You are paying attention to their values, standards, and decision-making. However, the praise should remain specific. Saying, "You're so smart," can feel vague, while saying, "I liked how you stayed calm and looked at both sides before deciding," feels personal and earned. The compliment should also be sincere. Empty praise designed to flatter can feel manipulative, especially when it arrives too often. The strongest recognition appears naturally after a real moment of good judgment. People may forget being told they looked attractive, especially if they hear it often, but being told that their instincts were strong, their choice was wise, or their perspective changed how you saw something can stay with them. It reflects a part of who they are that many people overlook. Text during meaningful moments. Texting during meaningful moments means reaching out when something important is happening in the other person's life. In dating, a message sent before an interview, after a difficult appointment, during a celebration, or on a day connected to an important memory can carry far more emotional weight than an ordinary check-in. This works because timing changes meaning. A simple, "I'm thinking of you today," may feel unforgettable when it arrives at the exact moment someone feels nervous, proud, lonely, or emotionally exposed. The words are not powerful because they are complicated. They are powerful because they show awareness. Meaningful timing communicates that you remember what matters to them. It proves that their life continues to exist in your mind even when you are not actively talking. That can make someone feel supported without needing to ask for attention. The strongest messages match the moment. Before something stressful, offer calm encouragement. After an achievement, recognize the effort behind it. During a difficult anniversary, acknowledge the day gently without forcing them to discuss it. However, these messages should never become intrusive. Some meaningful moments require space, especially when grief, family conflict, or personal pressure is involved. A thoughtful message should open a door, not demand an emotional response. You might say, "I know today was important to you. No pressure to reply, but I hope you feel proud of yourself." This creates warmth while respecting their emotional state. People often remember who appeared when the moment mattered. A perfectly written message sent at the wrong time may disappear, but a simple message that arrives during an emotionally significant moment can become attached to the memory itself. Calm attention is stronger than pressure. Calm attention means showing steady interest without demanding constant replies, reassurance, or emotional access. In dating, this can create a stronger connection than pressure because people feel closer when they are free to respond naturally rather than being pushed to prove their interest. Pressure often appears through repeated messages, questions about delayed replies, or constant demands for attention. Even when these behaviors come from excitement, they can make the other person feel monitored. Instead of enjoying the connection, they begin managing your expectations and worrying about how quickly they must respond. Calm attention feels different. You listen carefully, remember what matters, and respond with warmth. But you do not force every silence to end. Your presence communicates interest without making the person responsible for keeping you emotionally secure. This works because emotional freedom creates safety. When someone knows they can be busy, tired, or quiet without being punished, they are more likely to return willingly. They begin associating you with comfort rather than obligation. Your messages feel like something they want to open, not another demand they must handle. However, calm attention does not mean pretending not to care. Becoming cold, delaying replies deliberately, or hiding your feelings can create confusion. The strength comes from being clear and interested while remaining emotionally grounded. A message such as, "Take your time. I know you have a lot happening today," can carry surprising weight. It tells the person that you see their circumstances and respect their space. People are often drawn toward those who make connection feel easy rather than exhausting. Calm attention allows attraction to breathe, making your presence feel steady, respectful, and emotionally safe without needing pressure to hold their interest. Leave before the conversation becomes dull. Leaving before the conversation becomes dull means ending the exchange while the energy still feels warm, playful, or emotionally alive. In dating, many people keep texting simply because neither person wants to be the first to stop. What began with excitement slowly becomes repetitive, and the final messages are remembered as flat rather than meaningful. This matters because people often judge an interaction by its strongest moment and its ending. If the conversation continues until both people are tired, distracted, or searching for things to say, the emotional impact begins to fade. The person may remember the boredom at the end more clearly than the connection that came before it. Ending earlier protects the emotional quality of the exchange. You might say, "I enjoyed this, but I need to get back to my evening," or "We should continue this later before I ruin a good conversation by becoming tired." The message closes the interaction with warmth instead of exhaustion. This works because a strong ending leaves emotional energy unfinished. The other person may still have something they wanted to say, a question they wanted to ask, or a feeling they were enjoying. That small sense of incompletion can create anticipation for the next conversation. However, leaving should never feel abrupt, cold, or calculated. Disappearing without explanation can create confusion rather than attraction. The goal is not to make someone chase you. It is to avoid stretching a good interaction until it loses its value. People are more likely to think about a conversation that ended while they were still enjoying it. When you leave with warmth, confidence, and a clear reason, the connection remains associated with pleasure rather than fatigue. Notice and mention their personal growth. Noticing and mentioning someone's personal growth means recognizing the ways they have changed, improved, or become stronger over time. In dating, this can create a powerful emotional response because many people secretly wonder whether anyone sees the effort behind who they are becoming. You might notice that they now handle stress more calmly, speak with more confidence, set healthier boundaries, or pursue something they once feared. Saying, "You seem much more certain of yourself than when we first talked," can feel deeply personal because it proves you have been paying attention to their journey, not only their appearance. This works because growth is often invisible to the person experiencing it. Change happens slowly, and people may focus so heavily on what still needs fixing that they overlook how far they have come. When you reflect their progress back to them, you help make that growth real. The emotional impact becomes stronger when the recognition is specific. Saying, "You have changed," may feel vague, while saying, "You no longer apologize for expressing what you need," shows that you noticed something meaningful. However, the comment should never sound superior, as though you are grading their development. It should not imply that they were unworthy before. Healthy recognition honors both the struggle and the progress without judging the earlier version of them. People remember those who see more than their current mood or surface behavior. When someone feels that you notice their courage, discipline, and quiet transformation, your words can become part of how they understand themselves. Your message may stay with them because it does more than praise who they are. It confirms that their effort has not gone unseen. Validate feelings others overlook. Validating feelings others overlook means recognizing emotions that are often dismissed, minimized, or ignored. In dating, people may talk about something that seems small on the surface but carries a deeper emotional weight. When you notice that hidden feeling, you make them feel less alone. Someone might feel hurt by being excluded, embarrassed by a mistake, disappointed by a small rejection, or exhausted from always appearing strong. Others may respond with, "It's not that serious," or "You'll be fine." Those replies may be well-intentioned, but they can make the person feel foolish for caring. A validating response sounds different. You might say, "I understand why that bothered you," or "That may seem small to others, but I can see why it mattered to you." This does not mean agreeing with every reaction. It means acknowledging that the emotion has a real reason behind it. This works because overlooked feelings often become heavier when they are not understood. The person may begin questioning whether they are too sensitive, dramatic, or difficult. When you calmly name the emotion without judging it, you reduce that inner conflict. However, validation should not become exaggeration. You do not need to turn every disappointment into a crisis or encourage resentment. The strongest validation combines empathy with steadiness. People remember those who take their emotional world seriously without making it more chaotic. When you recognize the feeling everyone else dismissed, your message can stay with them because it quietly communicates, "You do not have to hide this part of yourself around me." Let them explain themselves fully. Letting someone explain themselves fully means resisting the urge to interrupt, correct, defend, or finish the story for them. In dating, this creates emotional safety because people often carry thoughts they have never been allowed to express without being judged halfway through. Many conversations fail because one person listens only long enough to react. They hear one sentence, assume the rest, and begin defending themselves before the full meaning is clear. The other person then feels misunderstood, frustrated, or emotionally trapped. Giving them room changes the entire experience. You allow pauses, ask gentle follow-up questions, and wait until they have finished before offering your view. This communicates that their perspective matters, even when it differs from yours. This works because being fully heard can reduce emotional tension. People often become calmer when they no longer have to fight for space in the conversation. They may explain themselves more honestly, correct misunderstandings, and reveal the real feeling beneath their first reaction. However, listening fully does not mean accepting disrespect or agreeing with everything they say. You can maintain boundaries while still allowing them to complete their thought. The goal is understanding before judgment. A simple message such as, "Take your time. I want to understand what you mean," can feel surprisingly intimate. It tells the person that you are not searching for the fastest reply or the easiest answer. People remember those who let them speak without making them feel rushed, foolish, or difficult. When someone can explain the parts of themselves that others usually interrupt, your attention becomes associated with relief, dignity, and the rare feeling of finally being heard. Use playful challenges without disrespect. Using playful challenges means gently teasing someone's confidence, opinions, or habits in a way that creates energy without making them feel attacked. In dating, this can keep conversations exciting because it adds light tension and gives both people something to respond to beyond constant agreement. You might challenge their claim that they make the best coffee, question whether their favorite movie is truly unbeatable, or jokingly suggest they would lose at a harmless game. The goal is not to prove them wrong. It is to create a playful moment where both people can show personality. This works because friendly challenge breaks the pressure to be perfect. It allows confidence, humor, and spontaneity to appear. The person may become more animated, defend their choice, tease you back, or suggest proving it later. The conversation gains movement because there is something emotionally engaging to play with. However, playful challenge must remain respectful. Teasing someone's appearance, intelligence, trauma, finances, family, or insecurities can quickly become humiliation. A joke is not harmless simply because you intended it to be funny. The other person's comfort matters more than your explanation. The strongest challenges target low-stakes subjects and include warmth. Your tone should make it clear that you enjoy the interaction, not that you are trying to dominate it. If the person becomes quiet, defensive, or uncomfortable, stop rather than pushing harder. Playful challenge should also be mutual. If you enjoy teasing but cannot accept it in return, the interaction becomes unequal. Healthy banter allows both people to participate without fear. When done well, a playful challenge makes someone smile, think of a clever reply, and feel more alive in the conversation. It creates chemistry through shared fun, not through disrespect or emotional pressure. Ask the question nobody else asks. Asking the question nobody else asks means noticing the part of someone's experience that others usually ignore. In dating, most people ask predictable questions about work, hobbies, family, or weekend plans. These questions keep conversation moving, but they rarely reach the thoughts someone quietly carries beneath the surface. A rare question might explore what they wish people understood about them, which part of their life feels most misunderstood, or what they have outgrown without realizing it. The power lies in making them pause. Instead of giving a rehearsed answer, they must search inward and respond from a more honest place. This works because unusual questions create emotional recognition. The person may feel that you are interested in more than their appearance, status, or entertaining stories. You are curious about the hidden beliefs, memories, and contradictions that shape who they are. The question can remain active even after the conversation ends. They may revisit it later, discover a different answer, or realize they have never been asked anything similar. Because you open that mental door, your presence becomes connected to the reflection. However, rare questions should never become invasive. Asking about trauma, painful family experiences, or private insecurities before trust exists can feel emotionally aggressive. The strongest question is deep enough to inspire thought, but gentle enough to respect boundaries. You must also listen carefully when they answer. Asking something meaningful and then changing the subject can make the curiosity feel performative. Give their response room to breathe. People remember the person who noticed the unexplored part of them. When your question helps someone express something they have felt but never clearly named, the conversation becomes difficult to forget. Say, honestly, when they cross your mind. Saying honestly when someone crosses your mind means letting them know they appeared in your thoughts without turning the moment into something dramatic. In dating, this can feel deeply personal because it shows that their presence continues beyond the conversation itself. You might hear a song they mentioned, remember something they said, or notice a place they would probably enjoy. A simple message like, "You crossed my mind when I saw this," can carry emotional weight because it feels spontaneous rather than forced. This works because people want to feel memorable. When someone realizes they entered your thoughts naturally, it suggests that they have already created an emotional association in your everyday life. They are no longer just another name on your screen. The strongest messages are specific, Saying why they crossed your mind makes the moment feel genuine. It shows that you remembered something connected to their personality, humor, preferences, or story. However, these messages should remain honest and occasional. Saying, "I can't stop thinking about you," too early or too often can create pressure. The goal is not to overwhelm someone with intensity, it is to share a real moment of remembrance. Timing also matters. A thoughtful message can brighten someone's day, but repeated messages during silence may feel demanding. Warmth becomes more powerful when it respects space. When you tell someone they crossed your mind, you quietly reveal that they have left an impression. The message may make them wonder when else you think of them, which can keep your presence active long after the reply has been sent. Share content linked to past conversations. Sharing content linked to past conversations means sending something that connects directly to a topic, joke, memory, or interest the other person mentioned before. In dating, this can feel unusually thoughtful because it proves that the conversation stayed with you after it ended. You might send a song connected to their favorite artist, an article related to something they care about, a funny clip that matches an inside joke, or a picture of a place they once said they wanted to visit. The content matters, but the deeper message is that you remembered. This works because people feel valued when their words influence what you notice later. A generic post can be forgotten quickly, but something tied to a past conversation creates emotional continuity. It shows that your attention is not limited to the moment you are actively texting. The strongest shared content is relevant and personal. Saying, "This reminded me of what you said about starting over," gives the message more meaning than simply forwarding a random link. It tells them exactly why the content brought them to mind. However, sharing should not become constant. Sending too many posts, videos, or articles can feel overwhelming, especially if the other person rarely responds. The goal is not to fill every silence. It is to choose something that genuinely connects to them. You should also avoid using content as a substitute for real conversation. A meaningful connection still needs your own words, curiosity, and emotional presence. When you share something linked to an earlier exchange, you quietly communicate that their thoughts became part of how you see the world. The content becomes proof that the conversation did not disappear. It continued living in your memory, waiting for the right moment to return. Reveal unexpected sides of yourself gradually. Revealing unexpected sides of yourself gradually means allowing someone to discover parts of your personality that are not immediately obvious. In dating, this creates emotional depth because people become more curious when each conversation reveals something new rather than presenting your entire identity at once. You may appear quiet but have a playful sense of humor, seem highly confident but secretly enjoy simple comforts, or have a serious career while carrying an unexpected creative passion. When these contrasts appear naturally, they make you feel more layered and difficult to reduce to one impression. This works because the mind becomes more engaged when new information challenges an earlier assumption. The person may think, "I did not expect that from you," and begin wondering what else they have not discovered. That curiosity can keep your presence active in their thoughts after the conversation ends. The key is gradual revelation. Sharing everything immediately can remove the natural pleasure of discovery. But hiding important information or creating a false personality can damage trust. Healthy mystery comes from pacing, not deception. Unexpected sides should appear through real stories, opinions, interests, and reactions. You do not need to announce that you are complicated or different. Allow the other person to notice the contrast for themselves. It is also important not to perform unusual traits simply to seem interesting. Forced unpredictability often feels artificial. The most memorable surprises are genuine parts of you that emerge when the conversation creates the right opening. People often think about someone who continues to challenge their first impression in positive ways. Each new layer makes the connection feel unfinished, giving them another reason to remain curious about the person behind the messages. Stay emotionally steady, but not boring. Staying emotionally steady but not boring means being reliable in the way you treat someone while still bringing variety, curiosity, and personality into the conversation. In dating, people are often drawn to emotional stability, but stability should not feel flat, repetitive, or lifeless. Emotional steadiness means you do not suddenly become cold after being affectionate, disappear to create panic, or punish someone because they did not reply quickly. Your respect remains consistent. The other person knows they will not be greeted with unnecessary drama, manipulation, or emotional confusion. But steadiness does not mean sending the same messages every day. You can remain dependable while changing the energy of the conversation. One moment may be playful, another thoughtful, and another quietly affectionate. You might introduce an unusual question, share a funny observation, or revisit something meaningful they said earlier. This works because healthy attraction needs both safety and stimulation. Safety allows someone to relax, while variety keeps their attention engaged. When both exist together, the connection feels secure without becoming predictable. The key is to keep your character consistent while allowing your expression to remain flexible. Your warmth should not disappear, but the way you show it can change. Sometimes it may appear through humor, sometimes through encouragement, and sometimes through calm silence. People often confuse emotional chaos with excitement. Sudden distance, jealousy, and mixed signals may create intensity, but they also create anxiety. Real emotional interest does not require someone to feel uncertain about your respect. When your presence feels stable, but your conversations still contain surprise, depth, and energy, the person can feel both comfortable and curious. They trust how you will treat them without knowing exactly what interesting thought, joke, or emotional moment you will bring next. Wish them luck before important events. Wishing someone luck before an important event means remembering what matters to them and reaching out before the moment begins. In dating, this can feel deeply personal because it shows that their life remains in your mind even when the conversation is quiet. The event might be an interview, examination, presentation, appointment, competition, difficult meeting, or personal challenge. A simple message like, "You've prepared for this. I hope it goes exactly the way you need," can carry more emotional weight than a long conversation sent at an ordinary time. This works because timing gives words meaning. Most people receive encouragement after they announce success or disappointment. Reaching out beforehand shows attention without waiting for a result. It tells them that you care about the pressure they are carrying, not only the outcome. The strongest messages are calm and specific. Instead of saying only "good luck," you might mention the quality that will help them, their preparation, patience, courage, or ability to stay composed. This makes the encouragement feel earned rather than automatic. However, the message should not create extra pressure. Avoid demanding updates immediately or making their event about your anxiety. A line such as, "No need to reply now, I just wanted you to know I'm rooting for you," gives support while respecting their focus. When someone enters an important moment with your words still fresh in their mind, your presence becomes connected to courage and reassurance. They may remember the message long after the event ends because you appeared before the applause, before the result, and before anyone knew whether things would go well. Follow up after difficult days. Following up after a difficult day means checking on someone after the immediate stress has passed. In dating, this can feel deeply meaningful because many people receive attention during the dramatic moment, then silence once the conversation ends. A thoughtful follow-up might say, "How are you feeling about yesterday now?" Or, "I know that was a heavy day. I wanted to check on you." The message shows that their struggle did not disappear from your mind just because the crisis became less visible. This works because emotional pain often feels loneliest afterward. During the difficult moment, someone may be busy surviving, explaining, or holding themselves together. Later, when everything becomes quiet, the emotional weight can return. Your message reaches them when they may no longer expect anyone to remember. The strongest follow-ups are gentle and specific. They do not force the person to reopen the entire experience. A message like, "You do not have to talk about it, but I hope today feels lighter," offers care without creating pressure. However, following up should not become emotional monitoring. Repeatedly asking whether someone is okay can feel overwhelming if they need space. The goal is to remind them that support remains available, not to demand vulnerability. It is also important to listen if they answer honestly. Avoid rushing to fix everything or turning the conversation toward your own experiences. Sometimes the most meaningful response is calm acknowledgement. People remember who checks on them after everyone else assumes the moment has passed. A thoughtful follow-up communicates that your care is not temporary, performative, or limited to easy days. It shows that you remember the quiet aftermath, when support can matter most. Offer fresh views on their problems. Offering a fresh view on someone's problem means helping them see the situation from an angle they may not have considered. In dating, this can make your conversations memorable because people often think repeatedly about the same difficulty until their thoughts become trapped in one emotional pattern. You might help them separate what they can control from what they cannot. Notice a strength they used without realizing it, or consider that another person's behavior may reflect that person's limitations rather than their own worth. A new perspective can create relief because it changes the meaning of the problem, even when the facts remain the same. This works because people remember those who help their minds feel less crowded. When someone has been carrying confusion, disappointment, or self-doubt, one thoughtful observation can interrupt the cycle. They may continue thinking about your words hours later because the problem suddenly looks different. However, offering perspective should not mean dismissing their feelings. Saying, "Just look at the positive side," can make someone feel misunderstood. Emotional validation should come first. Once they feel heard, they are more likely to consider another interpretation. The strongest fresh views are gentle rather than forceful. You might say, "I wonder whether you are blaming yourself for something that was never fully yours to control." This opens a possibility without telling them what they must believe. It is also important not to act like you have the answer to every problem. Sometimes people need support more than analysis. Ask whether they want another perspective before giving one. When your words help someone loosen a painful belief, recognize an overlooked option, or see themselves with more compassion, your conversation can remain in their mind because it gave them something emotionally useful to carry forward. Let meaningful messages breathe. Letting meaningful messages breathe means resisting the urge to immediately cover an emotional moment with more words. In dating, when someone sends something sincere, vulnerable, or deeply personal, the strongest response is not always another paragraph. Sometimes the meaning needs space to settle. A powerful message can lose its impact when it is followed too quickly by jokes, new questions, or unrelated updates. The emotional moment becomes buried before either person has time to feel it. A brief pause allows the words to remain present. This works because the mind continues processing emotionally important communication after it is read. The person may reread the message, think about why it affected them, or notice feelings they were not ready to express immediately. Silence gives that internal reaction room to develop. Letting a message breathe does not mean ignoring someone. If the moment requires reassurance, respond with warmth first. A simple line like, "I'm glad you trusted me with that," may be enough before allowing a natural pause. The key is knowing when not to rush. Constantly asking, "What are you thinking?" or "Why haven't you replied?" can turn a meaningful exchange into pressure. The person may need time to process rather than more conversation. This is especially important after compliments, confessions, apologies, or emotionally honest statements. Too many follow-up words can weaken what was already said clearly. When you allow meaning to sit quietly, the other person has time to absorb it without performing an immediate response. The message may stay active in their mind longer because it was not crowded out. Sometimes the words people remember most are the ones given enough silence to truly reach them. Give specific thanks instead of generic praise. Giving specific thanks means naming exactly what someone did and why it mattered to you. In dating, a general thank you is polite, but it can disappear quickly. A more personal message shows that you noticed the effort, intention, or emotional care behind the action. You might say, "Thank you for checking on me before my meeting. It made me feel less alone." Or, "I appreciated how patiently you listened without trying to interrupt." These messages do more than express gratitude. They reveal the emotional effect the person had on you. This works because specific appreciation feels believable. Generic praise can sound automatic, especially when it is repeated often. But when you describe the exact behavior you valued, the person knows your words are connected to a real moment. Specific thanks can also reinforce emotional closeness. It shows that their kindness did not go unnoticed, and that even small actions can leave an impact. People often remember those who recognize the effort others overlook. However, gratitude should not be exaggerated or used to create obligation. Overpraising a simple action may feel manipulative, especially if it seems designed to make the person repeat it. The strongest appreciation is warm, honest, and proportionate. It is also powerful to thank someone for qualities rather than favors alone. You might appreciate their honesty, calmness, thoughtfulness, or willingness to make space for your feelings. When someone understands exactly how they made your experience better, the message can stay with them. It tells them not only that you noticed what they did, but that their presence affected you in a meaningful and memorable way. Ask what they are excited about. Asking what someone is excited about means directing the conversation toward the future, rather than only discussing stress, routines, or problems. In dating, this can create a positive emotional connection because excitement reveals what gives a person energy, hope, and personal meaning. You might ask what they are looking forward to this month, which plan they cannot stop thinking about, or what small thing has been making them feel more alive lately. These questions often produce more revealing answers than asking only how their day went. This works because anticipation activates emotion. When someone talks about something they are excited about, their energy changes. They may become more expressive, detailed, and open. The conversation begins to carry the feeling of that future experience. Their answer can reveal ambitions, values, hidden interests, and parts of their personality that routine questions rarely uncover. You learn what motivates them, what they dream about, and what kind of life they are quietly trying to build. The strongest response is to stay curious. Ask what makes the event meaningful, how long they have wanted it, or what they hope it will feel like. This shows that you are not only waiting for your turn to speak. However, the question should never create pressure. Someone may be struggling and have nothing exciting to share. If that happens, do not make them feel inadequate. Even a small answer, such as a quiet weekend or favorite meal, deserves interest. People remember those who help them reconnect with hope. When someone talks about what they are looking forward to, your conversation becomes linked with anticipation, possibility, and the emotional feeling of moving toward something good. Text with purpose, not constant availability. Texting with purpose means reaching out because you have something genuine to share, ask, or express, not simply because you fear the connection will disappear during silence. In dating, constant availability can seem caring at first, but nonstop messages may eventually make communication feel automatic, pressured, or emotionally exhausting. Purposeful texting gives each interaction a reason to exist. You might follow up on something important, share an observation that reminded you of them, ask a question connected to an earlier conversation, or send encouragement before a difficult event. The message feels personal because it adds something meaningful instead of merely filling empty space. This works because attention becomes more valuable when it feels intentional. When someone knows your messages usually carry humor, thoughtfulness, support, or genuine curiosity, seeing your name can create positive anticipation. They expect an experience rather than another routine notification. However, texting with purpose does not mean becoming distant, calculating, or unavailable. You do not need to delay replies deliberately or disappear to seem important. The goal is not to create scarcity through emotional games. It is to maintain your own life while communicating with genuine interest. Constant messaging can sometimes hide insecurity. You may begin checking whether they still care, seeking reassurance through quick replies, or sending new messages before they have answered the previous ones. This can quietly turn attraction into obligation. Purposeful communication leaves room for both people to think, live, and return with something real to say. It shows that your interest is steady without requiring continuous proof. People often think more about messages that gave them a feeling, insight, or moment of connection. When you text with intention, your presence becomes associated with value rather than constant availability, making each conversation feel chosen instead of compulsory. Rare compliments often feel more valuable. Rare compliments often feel more valuable because they do not blend into a constant stream of praise. In dating, when someone is complimented every few minutes, the words may begin to feel automatic, exaggerated, or disconnected from anything real. But when praise appears at the right moment and points to something specific, it carries more emotional weight. This works because scarcity increases attention. A person is more likely to remember a compliment that feels earned than one repeated so often that it loses meaning. A simple statement like, "I admire how calmly you handled that," can stay longer than dozens of generic comments about appearance. Rare praise also creates credibility. When you do not compliment everything, the other person is more likely to trust the moments when you do. Your words feel observed rather than performed. They suggest that you noticed something important enough to name. The strongest compliments focus on qualities that others may overlook. You might recognize their patience, emotional strength, judgment, discipline, or the way they make people feel comfortable. These observations often reach deeper because they speak to identity rather than surface attraction. However, rare compliments should not become emotional withholding. Refusing to express appreciation just to make praise seem more powerful can feel cold or manipulative. The goal is not to make someone earn basic warmth. It is to avoid using compliments so carelessly that they lose sincerity. Timing matters as much as frequency. Praise given after a real moment of courage, kindness, or growth feels connected to experience. The person may replay it later because it confirms something meaningful about who they are. A compliment becomes memorable when it feels honest, specific, and uncommon enough to matter. Make them laugh. During hard moments. Making someone laugh during a hard moment means bringing gentle relief without dismissing what they are feeling. In dating, humor can become deeply memorable when it appears during stress, disappointment, or emotional exhaustion. The person may not remember every comforting sentence, but they may remember who helped them breathe again. This works because laughter briefly interrupts emotional pressure. It gives the mind a small break from worry and reminds the person that the difficult moment is not the only thing that exists. A well-timed joke, playful observation, or familiar shared reference can make the weight feel lighter without pretending the problem is unimportant. The key is emotional awareness. Humor should come after acknowledgement, not before it. If someone is hurting, immediately joking may feel dismissive. A better approach is to first show that you understand, then introduce something gentle when the moment allows it. Personal humor often works best because it feels safe and familiar. An inside joke or harmless reference can create warmth without forcing them to explain why it is funny. The laughter becomes connected to your shared bond. However, never joke about the pain itself, their insecurities, or something they trusted you with. Humor should offer relief, not turn vulnerability into entertainment. If they do not respond, do not push harder. When someone associates your presence with both understanding and emotional relief, your messages can become a source of comfort. They may think of you during future difficult moments because you did not only tell them things would improve, you helped them feel, even briefly, that they could survive the moment without losing all sense of lightness. Notice changes in their mood. Noticing changes in someone's mood means paying attention when their usual energy, tone, or texting style suddenly shifts. In dating, people do not always directly say when something is wrong. Their replies may become shorter, slower, quieter, or less playful, even while they insist that everything is fine. Recognizing these changes can make someone feel deeply seen. A gentle message such as, "You seem a little quieter than usual today. Is everything okay?" communicates that you notice more than their words. You are paying attention to the emotional person behind the screen. This works because many people become skilled at hiding their feelings. They may fear appearing needy, dramatic, or difficult, so they wait to see whether anyone notices without being told. When you calmly acknowledge the change, it can create relief. They realize they do not have to perform happiness around you. However, noticing a shift does not mean assuming you know the reason. A delayed reply may come from work, tiredness, or needing time alone. Accusing them of losing interest or demanding an explanation can turn awareness into pressure. The strongest approach remains gentle and gives them room to correct you. You might say, "I could be reading it wrong, but you do not seem like yourself today. No pressure to explain, I just wanted to check on you." This combines attention with respect. It is also important not to interrogate someone who says they need space. Emotional awareness includes knowing when to stay close and when to step back. People remember those who notice their quiet changes before their pain becomes obvious. When your attention feels caring rather than controlling, your presence can become associated with the rare comfort of being emotionally recognized without having to beg for understanding. Create small texting rituals. Creating small texting rituals means developing simple, repeated moments that both people begin to recognize and anticipate. In dating, these rituals can make a connection feel more personal because they give the relationship its own rhythm, language, and emotional pattern. A ritual might be sharing one strange question every Friday, sending a song at the end of a difficult day, exchanging a photograph of something beautiful, or using a particular phrase before an important event. The action itself may seem small, but repetition gives it meaning. This works because the brain becomes emotionally attached to familiar patterns. When a ritual repeatedly creates laughter, comfort, or closeness, the person begins anticipating it before it happens. A certain day, time, song, or phrase may automatically bring you into their thoughts. Small rituals also create continuity. They make separate conversations feel connected rather than random. Over time, the ritual can become a quiet sign that the relationship has developed something unique that does not exist in the same way with everyone else. However, texting rituals should develop naturally. Forcing daily messages, demanding participation, or becoming upset when the pattern is missed can turn something comforting into an obligation. The ritual should feel enjoyable, not like a test of loyalty. The strongest rituals remain flexible. People become busy, moods change, and some days require space. Missing one moment should not create conflict. The emotional value comes from shared meaning, not perfect consistency. When a small ritual becomes associated with your connection, ordinary moments can begin carrying emotional weight. The person may see a certain time approaching and think of you before any message arrives, because the pattern has already created a place for your presence inside their routine. Make conversations feel different from ordinary chats. Making conversations feel different from ordinary chats means creating an exchange that carries more curiosity, emotional awareness, and personality than the routine messages people receive every day. In dating, most conversations follow predictable patterns. They begin with basic greetings, move through daily updates, and end without leaving any real emotional impression. A different conversation does not need to be dramatic. It may simply include a thoughtful question, an unusual observation, a personal joke, or a response that notices the feeling behind someone's words. These small differences make the interaction feel less automatic and more alive. This works because the brain remembers contrast. When most chats feel repetitive, a conversation that makes someone laugh, reflect, or feel deeply understood becomes easier to recall. The person may begin associating you with the rare experience of feeling mentally stimulated and emotionally seen at the same time. The strongest conversations also have rhythm. They can move from humor to sincerity, from ordinary details to deeper meaning, without feeling forced. One moment may be playful, while the next reveals something real. That emotional variety keeps the exchange engaging without creating confusion. However, trying too hard to be different can make your messages feel rehearsed. Constantly asking intense questions, forcing mystery, or performing a personality that is not natural will eventually feel exhausting. The goal is not to make every text unforgettable. It is to communicate with genuine attention. When someone notices that talking to you feels more thoughtful, comfortable, and emotionally alive than their usual conversations, your presence begins to stand out. They may return not only because they like you, but because the interaction allows them to experience a part of themselves that ordinary chats rarely reach. Challenge limiting beliefs with care. Challenging limiting beliefs with care means helping someone question the negative ideas they have accepted about themselves without making them feel judged or corrected. In dating, people often reveal beliefs such as, "I always ruin good things," "I am not the kind of person people choose," or "I could never do that." These statements may sound casual, but they often come from years of disappointment, criticism, or fear. A thoughtful response can interrupt that pattern. You might say, "I do not think that is the whole truth about you," or "You handled something similar with more courage than you give yourself credit for." This invites them to consider another view without demanding that they instantly change how they feel. This works because limiting beliefs often survive through repetition. The more someone tells themselves the same painful story, the more permanent it begins to feel. When another person calmly reflects evidence that contradicts it, the belief can loosen slightly. However, care is essential. Telling someone to stop being negative or arguing aggressively against their feelings can make them feel misunderstood. Their belief may be inaccurate, but the pain behind it is still real. Validation should come before challenge. The strongest approach combines compassion with specific evidence. Remind them of a moment when they showed strength, adapted, or proved the belief incomplete. Do not offer empty motivation. Give them something real to reconsider. You should also avoid trying to become their therapist or rescuer. Your role is not to rebuild their entire self-image. It is to offer a gentler perspective when the moment naturally allows it. People remember those who help them see possibility without making them ashamed of their fear. Your words may stay with them because they quietly opened a door where they had only seen a wall. Honest emotions. Make conversations feel real. Honest emotions make conversations feel real because they allow both people to stop performing and communicate from a more genuine place. In dating, many people hide behind perfect replies, forced confidence, or constant humor because they fear being judged. The conversation may remain pleasant, but it never becomes emotionally meaningful. Honesty can be simple. You might admit that something made you nervous, that a conversation affected you more than expected, or that you genuinely enjoyed hearing from them. These small emotional truths create depth because they reveal the person behind the words. This works because authenticity lowers emotional defenses. When someone senses that you are not trying to appear flawless, they may feel safer being honest too. The interaction becomes less like a performance and more like a real exchange between two imperfect people. However, emotional honesty should not become uncontrolled disclosure. Sharing every fear, insecurity, or painful experience too early can create pressure. Healthy openness develops gradually and matches the level of trust. The strongest honest messages are clear without being dramatic. Saying, "I was disappointed, but I did not want to pretend I was unaffected," feels different from using emotion to create guilt. Honesty expresses what you feel without making the other person responsible for fixing it. It is also important to remain consistent. If you ask for honesty but punish uncomfortable answers, the conversation will quickly become guarded again. Emotional truth requires respect on both sides. People remember those who made it safe to speak without pretending. When your messages carry sincere emotion, the connection begins to feel alive, unpredictable, and human. The person may think about you later because the conversation gave them something rare, the feeling that neither of you had to hide behind perfect words. Ask them to teach you something. Asking someone to teach you something means inviting them to share a skill, idea, experience, or perspective they understand well. In dating, this can create a strong emotional connection because people feel valued when their knowledge is treated as useful and worth learning from. You might ask them to explain a hobby they love, show you how they approach a task, recommend where to begin with a subject, or describe why something matters to them. The request communicates that you do not only enjoy their attention, you respect their mind, ability, and experience. This works because teaching allows someone to express confidence without forcing them to impress you. They become more animated, detailed, and emotionally present when discussing something they understand deeply. You also see a side of their personality that routine questions may never reveal. The strongest effect comes from genuine interest. Ask because you truly want to understand, not because you are pretending to need help. Follow their explanation carefully, ask relevant questions, and remember what they taught you later. This proves that their effort mattered. However, the request should not turn into helplessness or constant dependence. Asking someone to teach you everything may create emotional labor rather than connection. Choose something specific and respect their time. It is also important not to challenge their knowledge simply to compete. Curiosity should feel appreciative, not like a hidden test. When someone teaches you something meaningful, the conversation becomes associated with competence, recognition, and shared discovery. They may think about you later because you gave them the rare experience of feeling both interesting and capable, while allowing a part of their world to become part of yours. Respectful disagreement can create stronger interest. Respectful disagreement means expressing a different opinion without insulting, dismissing, or trying to dominate the other person. In dating, constant agreement may feel pleasant at first, but it can eventually make conversations feel artificial. When you disagree calmly, you show that you have your own mind while still respecting theirs. You might say, "I understand why you see it that way, but my experience led me somewhere different." This keeps the conversation open. The disagreement becomes an invitation to explore both perspectives rather than a fight one person must win. This works because thoughtful contrast creates mental stimulation. The other person must consider your reasoning, explain their own view, and sometimes question assumptions they have never examined. The conversation becomes more engaging because both people are contributing something real. Respectful disagreement can also build trust. It proves that honesty does not automatically lead to rejection, ridicule, or emotional punishment. Someone may feel safer sharing their true thoughts when they know you can handle differences without becoming cold or aggressive. However, disagreement should never target personal insecurities, deeply held identities, or painful experiences for entertainment. Mocking someone and calling it debate creates defensiveness, not connection. The goal is understanding, not superiority. The strongest disagreements contain curiosity. Ask how they formed their opinion and listen without preparing an attack. You can remain firm in your view while allowing theirs to exist. People often think about conversations that challenge them without humiliating them. When you disagree with confidence, warmth, and emotional control, you show that connection does not require pretending to be identical. It can survive difference and become more interesting because of it. Let them feel safe, being imperfect. Letting someone feel safe being imperfect means creating a space where they do not have to hide every flaw, mistake, insecurity, or awkward moment to keep your interest. In dating, many people perform a polished version of themselves because they fear that one wrong word, delayed reply, or emotional weakness will make them less desirable. When you respond to imperfections with calmness rather than ridicule, the connection begins to feel real. You might laugh gently with them after an awkward moment, reassure them after a mistake, or remind them that they do not need to explain every small flaw. This communicates that your interest is not dependent on constant perfection. This works because emotional safety reduces performance. When someone no longer feels watched or judged, they become more relaxed, expressive, and honest. Their real humor appears. Their fears become easier to admit. Their personality begins to unfold without being filtered through anxiety. However, accepting imperfection does not mean tolerating disrespect, dishonesty, or harmful behavior. Emotional safety should never erase healthy boundaries. The goal is to make room for human mistakes, not excuse repeated mistreatment. The strongest reassurance is often subtle, saying, "You do not have to be perfect around me," may help, but your reactions matter more than your promises. If you become cold whenever they disappoint you, your words lose meaning. People remember those who made them feel lovable without requiring flawless performance. When someone realizes they can be nervous, uncertain, tired, or imperfect without losing your respect, your presence becomes associated with relief. They may think about you because being around you allows them to lower the mask they wear almost everywhere else. Respond without judgment to deepen trust. Responding without judgment means listening to someone's thoughts, mistakes, fears, or experiences without immediately shaming, mocking, or condemning them. In dating, this can deepen trust because people rarely reveal their real selves when they expect criticism. Someone may share a past mistake, an insecurity, an unpopular opinion, or a feeling they are embarrassed to admit. If your first response is harsh, sarcastic, or dismissive, they will likely become more guarded. But if you respond with calm curiosity, they may feel safe enough to be more honest. This works because trust grows when vulnerability is met with respect. A message like, "I may not fully understand yet, but I appreciate you telling me," can reduce fear without pretending that every behavior is acceptable. It shows that you are willing to understand before deciding how you feel. Responding without judgment does not mean agreeing with everything. You can dislike a choice, challenge harmful behavior, or maintain boundaries while still treating the person with dignity. The difference lies in whether your response seeks understanding or humiliation. The strongest approach separates the person from the mistake. Instead of making them feel permanently defined by one decision, you allow room for context, accountability, and growth. It is also important not to use their honesty against them later. If someone shares something private and you bring it up during an argument, they may never feel safe opening up again. People remember those who made difficult truths feel speakable. When someone realizes they can reveal an imperfect part of themselves without immediately losing your respect, the connection becomes more secure. Your presence begins to feel like a place where honesty is not punished, even when the truth is complicated. Recall forgotten shared moments. Recalling forgotten shared moments means bringing back a small experience the other person may not expect you to remember. In dating, this can create a strong emotional effect because it proves that even ordinary moments with them stayed in your mind. You might mention a funny mistake from an early conversation, a small promise they made, a strange place you both noticed, or a sentence they said that stayed with you. The moment may have seemed insignificant at the time, but remembering it later gives it new emotional value. This works because memory creates meaning. When you recall something they had nearly forgotten, the person realizes that the interaction mattered more to you than they assumed. A simple shared experience suddenly feels important because it survived in someone else's mind. Forgotten moments can also restore closeness during quiet periods. Mentioning an old joke or early conversation can bring back the warmth of a time when the connection felt new. It reminds both people that the relationship has history, even if that history is made of small moments. However, the memory should be chosen carefully. Bringing up an embarrassing or painful moment may create discomfort rather than connection. The strongest memories are warm, harmless, or emotionally meaningful. You should also avoid recalling details in a way that feels like surveillance. The goal is not to prove that you remember everything. It is to show that one particular moment left a genuine impression. When you bring back a forgotten shared memory, you quietly communicate, "That moment mattered to me." The person may begin revisiting other experiences with you, realizing that your connection contains more emotional history than they had noticed. Send words they may reread for confidence. Sending words someone may reread for confidence means offering encouragement that feels specific, sincere, and strong enough to remain useful after the conversation ends. In dating, the most memorable messages are often not the most romantic. They are the ones someone returns to when they feel uncertain, discouraged, or afraid. You might remind them of a strength they have already shown, the effort they made, or the way they handled something difficult. A message like, "You have already survived moments that once felt impossible, and you did it without becoming cruel," can feel more powerful than a vague statement such as, "You've got this." This works because confidence often disappears under pressure. During difficult moments, people forget their progress and focus only on what could go wrong. Your words can temporarily become the steadier voice they cannot find within themselves. The strongest encouragement is grounded in evidence. Mention something real they accomplished, a quality you observed, or a moment when they acted with courage. Specific words are easier to trust because they do not feel like empty motivation. However, encouragement should never create dependence. The goal is not to make someone believe they are strong only because you say so. Your message should point them back toward their own ability, judgment, and resilience. It is also important to avoid exaggerated promises. Saying everything will work out may feel comforting, but it can sound hollow when the outcome is uncertain. Confidence grows more honestly when you remind them that they can handle whatever happens. People often save messages that helped them see themselves differently. When your words give someone a clear reason to believe in their own strength, they may reread them during quiet moments, carrying your voice with them long after the conversation has ended. Notice their effort before others do. Noticing someone's effort before others do means recognizing the work, discipline, courage, or emotional strength behind what they are trying to achieve. In dating, most people receive attention only after success becomes visible. They are praised when they win, improve, or finally prove themselves. Few people notice the quiet struggle that came first. You might recognize how much preparation they are putting into a goal, how hard they are trying to stay calm, or how often they continue despite feeling tired. A message like, "I can see how much effort you are putting into this, even if the result has not arrived yet," can feel deeply personal. This works because unseen effort can become emotionally exhausting. People often wonder whether anyone notices the sacrifices, private doubts, or small decisions required to keep going. When you acknowledge that hidden work, they feel recognized before they have anything impressive to show. The strongest praise focuses on something specific. Saying, "You work hard," may feel pleasant, but saying, "I noticed that you kept showing up even when you were discouraged," feels more truthful and memorable. However, the recognition should not sound patronizing. You are not rewarding them like a child or judging whether their effort is sufficient. You are simply reflecting something meaningful that others may have missed. It is also important not to attach your approval to their performance. Their value should not depend on success. Sometimes effort leads to disappointment, and your respect should remain steady. People remember those who saw them during the invisible stage. When you notice the struggle before the applause, your words can become part of what helped them continue. Use sensory language to make texts vivid. Using sensory language means describing an experience through sight, sound, touch, taste, or smell so the other person can almost feel the moment with you. In dating, this can make an ordinary message far more memorable because the mind responds more strongly to scenes than to plain facts. Instead of saying, "The weather is nice," you might say, "The air feels cool, the street is quiet, and everything smells like rain." The message becomes more than information. It gives the person a small world to step into. This works because sensory details activate imagination. When someone can picture the light, hear the sound, or sense the atmosphere you are describing, they become more emotionally involved. Your words begin to feel like an experience rather than a report. Sensory language can also make compliments and memories feel more personal. Saying, "I liked your perfume" is simple, but saying, "That soft scent stayed in my mind after you left" carries more emotional texture. The person may replay the moment because your wording gave it shape. However, sensory language should remain natural. Too much description can feel theatrical, forced, or overly intense. The strongest messages use one or two clear details instead of turning every conversation into poetry. It also works best when connected to real emotion. A vivid scene without meaning may sound pretty, but still feel empty. The sensory detail should help reveal why the moment mattered to you. People often forget plain updates, but they remember scenes they could almost experience. When your words create a clear image or atmosphere, your message can remain active in their mind long after the screen goes quiet. Ask thoughtful questions before bedtime. Asking thoughtful questions before bedtime means giving someone a meaningful idea to reflect on as their day becomes quiet. In dating, nighttime conversations often feel more emotionally open because distractions fade, responsibilities slow down, and people become more aware of thoughts they ignored during the day. A thoughtful question might ask which moment made them feel most alive recently, what they wish they could tell their younger self, or what kind of life would make them feel genuinely peaceful. These questions go beyond routine updates and invite the person to explore memories, hopes, and emotions. This works because the mind often continues processing unfinished thoughts before sleep. Even after the conversation ends, the person may replay the question, reconsider their answer, or discover something new about themselves. Because you introduced the reflection, your presence becomes connected to that quiet mental experience. The strongest bedtime questions feel gentle rather than demanding. They should not force someone to discuss trauma, painful memories, or deeply private subjects when they are emotionally tired. The purpose is to create meaningful curiosity, not leave them distressed or unable to rest. Timing also matters. If the person is exhausted, stressed, or clearly ready to sleep, a deep question may feel like work. A simple message such as, "You can answer tomorrow, but what is something you are quietly looking forward to?" removes pressure while keeping the thought alive. You should also listen carefully when they return with an answer. Treating their reflection casually can weaken the trust created by the question. A thoughtful question asked at the right moment may remain in someone's mind after the screen goes dark, linking your presence with stillness, emotional depth, and the rare feeling of being invited to understand themselves more clearly. Celebrate their small victories. Celebrating someone's small victories means recognizing progress that may seem ordinary to everyone else but matters deeply to them. In dating, people are often praised only for major achievements. They receive attention after the promotion, graduation, public success, or dramatic transformation. The smaller steps that made those moments possible often go unseen. A small victory might be completing a difficult task, setting a boundary, attending an appointment they feared, returning to a goal, or simply getting through a stressful day without giving up. A message like, "I know that may seem small, but I remember how hard it was for you to start," can feel more meaningful than exaggerated applause. This works because recognition strengthens emotional connection. When someone notices progress before it becomes impressive, the person feels understood rather than merely admired. They realize you are paying attention to their process, not only the final result. The strongest celebration is specific and proportionate. Mention what changed, why it mattered, or what quality helped them achieve it. Generic praise may feel pleasant, but detailed recognition feels personal and believable. However, celebration should never sound patronizing. Avoid treating ordinary adult choices like childish accomplishments. The goal is to honor the effort without making the person feel small. It is also important not to turn their success into your own achievement. Let the moment remain about them. Ask how it feels, reflect their progress, and allow them to enjoy it without immediately shifting the conversation elsewhere. People remember those who made their quiet wins feel real. When you celebrate the steps others overlook, your presence becomes associated with encouragement, recognition, and the feeling that their progress matters even before the rest of the world notices. Make ordinary moments feel meaningful. Making ordinary moments feel meaningful means noticing the emotional value hidden inside everyday experiences. In dating, not every memorable connection is built through dramatic confessions, expensive dates, or intense conversations. Sometimes the strongest bond develops when someone makes a simple moment feel worth remembering. You might turn a quiet walk, a shared meal, a rainy afternoon, or a random late-night conversation into something special by noticing what others would overlook. A message like, "That 5-minute conversation changed the mood of my whole day," gives emotional weight to something that may have seemed small. This works because people want to feel that their presence matters. When you show that an ordinary moment with them affected you, they begin to see the interaction differently. What once felt casual becomes part of a shared emotional memory. The strongest approach is specific. Mention the laugh that stayed with you, the calmness you felt, or the exact detail that made the moment stand out. Specific observations feel more believable than dramatic statements. However, meaning should not be forced. Treating every small interaction as life-changing can feel exaggerated or emotionally intense. The goal is not to make ordinary moments dramatic. It is to recognize genuine warmth when it appears. Ordinary moments are often more powerful because they feel natural. They show what the connection is like without performance, pressure, or preparation. A person may begin thinking about how comfortable the silence felt, how easily the conversation flowed, or how unexpectedly happy they were. When you give language to these quiet experiences, they become harder to forget. You help the other person realize that meaningful connection does not always announce itself. Sometimes it appears in the smallest moment and stays long after it ends. Return warmly after natural silence. Returning warmly after natural silence means reconnecting without guilt, accusation, or pretending the pause damaged the connection. In dating, silence can happen for ordinary reasons. People become busy, emotionally tired, distracted, or simply need time away from their phones. The way you return can determine whether the space feels comfortable or tense. A warm return might sound like, "I hope your week has been kind to you," or "Something reminded me of our conversation, so I wanted to check in." These messages reopen the connection without demanding an explanation for every quiet day. This works because emotional ease is attractive. When someone knows they can step away without being punished, they feel less pressure around you. Your presence becomes associated with freedom rather than obligation. They are more likely to return because they want to, not because they fear conflict. The strongest returns acknowledge the person, not the silence. Instead of saying, "So you finally remembered me," focus on warmth, curiosity, or something meaningful you genuinely want to share. This protects the connection from unnecessary defensiveness. However, natural silence is different from repeated neglect. If someone constantly disappears, avoids accountability, or only returns when convenient, warmth should not replace healthy boundaries. Emotional maturity includes recognizing when a pattern is becoming disrespectful. You also do not need to act overly casual if the silence genuinely affected you. Honest communication can remain calm. "I am glad to hear from you. I was unsure what the distance meant." This invites clarity without creating drama. People often remember those who make reconnection feel easy. When you return with warmth rather than punishment, the relationship can continue without carrying the emotional weight of every pause. Show interest without demanding attention. Showing interest without demanding attention means making your care clear while allowing the other person the freedom to respond naturally. In dating, genuine interest feels warm and inviting. Demanded attention feels like pressure, especially when every delayed reply becomes a question about whether they still care. You can show interest by remembering important details, checking in thoughtfully, asking meaningful questions, or sharing something connected to their personality. These actions communicate that they matter to you without requiring them to remain constantly available. This works because attraction grows more comfortably when attention feels chosen. When someone knows they can focus on work, rest, friends, or personal responsibilities without being punished, they begin associating your presence with emotional freedom. They return because the conversation feels good, not because they fear disappointing you. Demanding attention often appears through repeated messages, guilt-filled comments, or questions such as, "Why are you ignoring me?" when only a short time has passed. These reactions may come from insecurity, but they can make the other person feel responsible for regulating your emotions. The strongest approach combines warmth with self-respect. You can express that you enjoy hearing from them while continuing to live a full life outside the conversation. Interest should add to your day, not consume it. However, respecting space does not mean accepting prolonged neglect or inconsistent behavior. If someone repeatedly ignores you, it is healthy to communicate your needs clearly and decide whether the connection is mutual. People think more about those whose attention feels comforting rather than controlling. When you show genuine interest without demanding constant proof, your presence becomes associated with trust, ease, and the feeling that connection can remain strong without becoming a cage. Keep effort balanced on both sides. Keeping effort balanced on both sides means allowing the connection to be built by two people rather than one person carrying every conversation. In dating, interest feels more secure when both people initiate, ask questions, remember details, and make time for each other. When one person always sends the first message, introduces every topic, or tries to revive every silence, the connection can become emotionally exhausting. They may begin wondering whether the other person genuinely cares or is simply responding because attention is available. Balanced effort creates reassurance because interest becomes visible through action. The other person checks on you, follows up on things you mentioned, and contributes energy without needing to be pushed. You no longer have to study every reply for proof that the connection matters. This works because mutual investment increases emotional value. People often become more attached to relationships they actively help build. When both sides contribute, conversations develop shared memories, rituals, humor, and meaning that belong equally to each person. However, balance does not mean measuring every message or demanding perfect equality. One person may be busier, quieter, or less expressive through text. What matters is the overall pattern. Effort can appear through thoughtful replies, reliability, planning, emotional support, or making time when it counts. You should never reduce your effort purely to test whether someone will chase you. Tests create anxiety and turn communication into a hidden competition. A healthier approach is to communicate your needs clearly and observe whether the other person responds consistently. People feel safest in connections where they are wanted but not required to do all the emotional work. When effort flows from both sides, interest feels mutual, natural, and strong enough to continue without one person constantly pulling it forward. Ask why their choices matter to them. Asking why someone's choices matter to them means looking beyond what they choose and becoming curious about the meaning behind it. In dating, people often talk about favorite places, careers, hobbies, routines, or goals, but the deeper story is usually hidden inside the reason. Someone may love a certain city because it represents freedom. They may protect a quiet routine because chaos shaped their childhood. They may choose a difficult career because it gives them purpose. When you ask why the choice matters, you move from collecting facts to understanding identity. This works because people feel deeply seen when someone notices the meaning beneath their decisions. A question such as, "What makes that so important to you?" can open a part of the conversation that ordinary questions never reach. The answer may reveal values, fears, memories, and hopes that have guided their life for years. The strongest approach is curious, not analytical. Do not make the person feel as though every choice requires justification. Your tone should communicate interest rather than suspicion. They should feel invited to explain, not pressured to defend themselves. It is also important to listen without immediately comparing their answer to your own experience. Let their meaning remain theirs. Follow the details, ask gently, and notice the emotion that appears as they speak. People often remember the person who wanted to know not only what they liked, but why it mattered. When someone explains the deeper reason behind a choice, they reveal part of the inner structure of who they are. Your question can become memorable because it showed that you were interested in the life beneath the decision, not just the decision itself. Communicate clearly instead of creating confusion. Communicating clearly means expressing your interest, boundaries, expectations, and emotions without forcing the other person to decode mixed signals. In dating, confusion can create intense thinking, but that does not mean it creates healthy attraction. Often, it creates anxiety, self-doubt, and emotional exhaustion. Someone may become preoccupied when affection suddenly turns cold, plans remain vague, or meaningful messages are followed by unexplained silence. They may keep replaying the conversation, wondering what changed or what they did wrong. This attention is not genuine closeness. It is the mind trying to find safety inside uncertainty. Clear communication feels different. You say what you mean, explain changes when necessary, and avoid making promises you cannot keep. A message like, "I enjoy talking to you, but I have a demanding week and may reply slowly," prevents unnecessary confusion while preserving warmth. This works because clarity builds trust. When people understand where they stand, they can relax and respond honestly. They do not need to analyze punctuation, timing, or emotional shifts for hidden meaning. Your words become reliable rather than mentally exhausting. However, clarity does not require revealing every feeling immediately. You can still allow a connection to unfold gradually. The difference is that pacing creates curiosity, while contradiction creates insecurity. Clear communication also includes difficult truths. If your interest changes, avoiding the conversation may feel easier, but prolonged ambiguity often hurts more. Respect means giving someone enough honesty to make informed choices. People may obsess over those who confuse them, but they feel safest with those who communicate consistently. When your messages are honest, calm, and understandable, your presence becomes associated with emotional security rather than the painful need to keep guessing. Reflect strengths they may not see. Reflecting strengths someone may not see means recognizing qualities they overlook in themselves and gently bringing those qualities into view. In dating, people often speak openly about their flaws, while minimizing the courage, patience, discipline, or emotional intelligence they show every day. Someone may describe surviving a difficult period as just getting through it, even though it required enormous resilience. They may call themselves indecisive while carefully considering how their choices affect others. When you reflect the strength hidden inside their behavior, you help them see themselves from a more compassionate angle. This works because people become emotionally attached to those who recognize value they have struggled to believe in. A message like, "You are more resilient than you realize," becomes more powerful when supported by something specific. You kept showing up even when you were exhausted and unsure. The strongest reflections are based on real evidence. Empty praise may feel pleasant, but it rarely changes self-perception. Specific observations feel believable because they connect the strength to something the person actually did. However, you should not argue aggressively with how they feel. If someone is struggling, immediately insisting that they are strong can sound dismissive. Acknowledge the difficulty first, then reflect what you noticed within it. It is also important not to make them dependent on your approval. The goal is not to become the only person who can make them feel valuable. Your words should guide them toward recognizing their own qualities. People remember those who saw something good in them before they could see it clearly themselves. When your message gives language to a hidden strength, it may remain in their mind and slowly become part of how they understand who they are. Avoid over-explaining every message. Avoiding over-explaining means trusting that your message can stand without adding endless details, apologies, or justifications. In dating, over-explaining often happens when someone fears being misunderstood, rejected, or judged. They keep adding words until a simple thought becomes emotionally heavy. A clear message like, "I cannot talk tonight, but I would like to continue tomorrow," usually communicates enough. Adding several paragraphs about why, whether the other person is upset, and how much you still care can make the message feel anxious rather than reassuring. This works because clarity often feels confident. When your words are direct and emotionally accurate, the other person does not have to search through unnecessary explanations to understand your meaning. The message feels chosen rather than panicked. Over-explaining can also place hidden pressure on the receiver. They may feel expected to reassure you, answer every detail, or prove they are not offended. What began as communication becomes emotional work. However, brevity should not become coldness. Important situations may require context, especially when plans change, feelings are hurt, or trust has been affected. The goal is not to remove necessary explanation. It is to stop speaking long after the meaning is already clear. The strongest approach combines honesty with restraint. Say what happened, what you feel, and what you intend to do next. Then allow the message to breathe. People often think more about words that feel calm and precise. When you stop over-explaining, your communication becomes easier to trust because it does not sound like you are trying to control every possible interpretation. Your message feels grounded, leaving the other person space to understand it without carrying your fear for you. Leave them with a useful insight. Leaving someone with a useful insight means offering a thought that helps them understand a situation, emotion, or part of themselves more clearly. In dating, this can make your conversations memorable because people often think about those who leave their mind better than they found it. A useful insight may help them see that a rejection was not proof of low worth, that exhaustion can look like laziness, or that a difficult decision may feel painful because both options matter. The power comes from giving language to something they were already feeling but could not fully explain. This works because clarity creates emotional relief. When someone has been trapped inside the same thoughts, one accurate observation can loosen the pressure. They may replay your words later, apply them to another situation, or realize that the problem looks different than it did before. The strongest insights are simple and relevant. They should grow naturally from what the person has shared, rather than sounding like a lecture. A sentence such as, "You may not be afraid of failing. You may be afraid that success will change what people expect from you," can open a deeper reflection without forcing an answer. However, useful insight should not become constant advice. People do not always need their problems analyzed. Sometimes they need to feel heard first, ask questions, understand the emotion, and offer perspective only when it fits. It is also important to remain humble. Your interpretation may be incomplete, so leave room for correction. You can say, "I may be wrong, but this is what I'm noticing." People remember conversations that give them something valuable to carry away. When your words help someone see themselves with more honesty, compassion, or possibility, your presence can continue inside their thinking long after the chat has ended. Appreciate them without needing a reason. Appreciating someone without needing a reason means expressing warmth, gratitude, or admiration even when they have not achieved something, helped you, or performed in a way that earns praise. In dating, this can feel deeply emotional because many people are used to receiving attention only when they are useful, impressive, attractive, or easy to love. A simple message like, "I appreciate the way you exist in my life," or "You crossed my mind and I felt grateful for you," can carry surprising weight. It tells the person that their value is not limited to what they provide. Their presence alone has meaning. This works because unconditional appreciation touches a private fear many people carry, the fear that they must constantly prove their worth to remain wanted. When someone feels valued without performing, they can relax. They no longer have to entertain, impress, solve problems, or hide difficult emotions to keep your attention. The strongest appreciation is sincere and specific enough to feel real. You might appreciate their energy, honesty, perspective, or the calmness their presence brings. The message does not need a major event behind it. Its power comes from arriving unexpectedly. However, appreciation should not become exaggerated love bombing. Intense declarations too early can feel manipulative or emotionally overwhelming. Genuine warmth grows stronger when it matches the stage of the relationship and reflects what you truly know about the person. It is also important not to use appreciation as a hidden request. Saying something kind only because you expect reassurance, attention, or affection in return turns gratitude into pressure. People remember those who made them feel valuable without requiring a performance. When appreciation appears freely, it creates the rare feeling of being wanted not for what they did, but for who they are. Remember, important dates and events. Remembering important dates and events means keeping track of the moments that carry emotional weight in someone's life. In dating, this can create a strong sense of care because it shows that what matters to them has also become important enough for you to remember. The date may be an interview, examination, family celebration, personal milestone, difficult anniversary, or day connected to a major decision. A simple message sent at the right time can feel more meaningful than a long conversation on an ordinary day. This works because memory signals attention. When someone realizes they did not need to remind you, they feel that their life exists in your mind, beyond the moments when they are actively speaking. You are not only responding to what is happening now, you are carrying part of their story forward. The strongest messages match the meaning of the event. Before an important day, offer encouragement. Afterward, ask how it felt rather than focusing only on the result. During a sensitive anniversary, acknowledge the moment gently without forcing them to explain their emotions. However, remembering dates should not feel like surveillance or obligation. You do not need to record every detail or prove that you know everything about them. The goal is to remember the moments they clearly showed mattered. It is also important to respond with sensitivity. Some dates bring mixed emotions, and cheerful messages may not always fit. Emotional awareness matters more than perfect wording. People often remember who showed up at the right moment without being reminded. When you recognize an important date with warmth and respect, your message can become part of the memory itself, linking your presence with support, attention, and the feeling that their life truly matters to you. Use inside references to strengthen closeness. Using inside references means bringing back a phrase, joke, memory, or detail that only the two of you fully understand. In dating, this can strengthen closeness because it creates a private language built from shared experiences. A single word can carry an entire story that outsiders would never recognize. An inside reference might come from a funny misunderstanding, an unusual nickname, a place you both noticed, or something one of you said during an important conversation. When it appears again later, it can instantly revive the emotion connected to the original moment. This works because shared meaning creates psychological intimacy. The person does not need a long explanation. They understand immediately, and that instant recognition makes the connection feel distinct from ordinary conversations. Inside references also create continuity. They show that previous moments were not forgotten. Each time the reference returns, it gathers more emotional meaning and becomes part of the relationship's identity. However, the reference should remain respectful. It should never target an insecurity, painful memory, or embarrassing mistake the other person wants forgotten. A private joke stops creating closeness when only one person finds it funny. The strongest references appear naturally rather than constantly. Repeating them too often can make them lose their emotional effect. Their value comes from arriving at the right moment and quietly reminding both people of something they share. People feel closer when a simple phrase can return them to a memory, mood, or private understanding. An inside reference says, without needing to explain, "We have experienced something together, and I still remember what it meant." Mix emotional warmth with mental stimulation. Mixing emotional warmth with mental stimulation means creating conversations that feel comforting while also giving the other person something interesting to think about. In dating, warmth alone can feel safe but eventually repetitive, while constant intellectual challenge can feel cold or exhausting. The strongest connection often combines both. Emotional warmth appears through kindness, patience, reassurance, humor, and genuine attention. Mental stimulation appears through thoughtful questions, fresh perspectives, playful disagreement, and conversations that move beyond ordinary updates. Together, they make someone feel both emotionally accepted and mentally engaged. This works because people are often drawn to those who affect more than one part of them. A person may enjoy how calm they feel around you while also looking forward to the unusual ideas, questions, or observations you bring. Your presence becomes connected with comfort and curiosity at the same time. You might listen carefully to something personal, then ask a question that helps them see it differently. You might share a playful debate while still respecting their opinion. The conversation remains warm enough to feel safe, but layered enough to stay memorable. However, mental stimulation should never become constant testing. Asking intense questions, correcting every opinion, or turning every discussion into a debate can make someone feel examined rather than understood. Warmth should remain visible even during disagreement. The strongest balance allows someone to relax without becoming bored and think deeply without feeling judged. They leave the conversation feeling emotionally lighter but mentally more awake. People often think about those who make them feel understood while also introducing ideas they continue exploring afterward. When warmth and stimulation exist together, your messages can become both a place of comfort and a source of lasting curiosity. Personalize messages instead of copying lines. Personalizing messages means shaping your words around the actual person instead of relying on copied compliments, recycled flirting, or lines designed to work on anyone. In dating, generic messages may sound polished, but they rarely create a lasting emotional impression because the receiver can sense that the same words could have been sent to someone else. A personalized message reflects something specific about their personality, humor, interests, experiences, or way of thinking. Instead of saying, "You are different," you might say, "I like how you notice details most people rush past." The second message feels more intimate because it proves that your attention is connected to who they truly are. This works because people want to feel individually seen. When your message could only make sense for them, it creates emotional significance. They understand that you are not simply searching for something attractive to say. You are thinking about them specifically. Personalized messages also build trust. Copied lines can create quick excitement, but they often feel hollow once the pattern becomes obvious. Genuine observations are easier to believe because they are grounded in real conversations and shared moments. However, personalization should never become invasive. Mentioning details they barely remember sharing or revealing that you have studied their online activity too closely can feel uncomfortable. The strongest messages use information they willingly shared and connect it naturally to the present moment. You also do not need perfect wording. A simple, sincere message often carries more value than an impressive line taken from somewhere else. People remember words that make them feel uniquely recognized. When your message reflects something real about them, it communicates that they are not receiving a performance. They are receiving your genuine attention. Ask how experiences change them. Asking how an experience changed someone means moving beyond what happened and becoming curious about what the moment did to them internally. In dating, people often tell stories about past relationships, difficult seasons, achievements, losses, or major decisions, but few are asked how those experiences reshaped who they became. A question like, "How did that change the way you see yourself?" or "What part of you became different after that?" can open a much deeper conversation. Instead of repeating facts, the person begins exploring the meaning behind the memory. This works because important experiences rarely leave people untouched. They can change how someone trusts, loves, protects themselves, takes risks, or understands the world. When you ask about that transformation, you show interest in more than their history. You are trying to understand the person their history created. The strongest questions feel gentle and respectful. Some experiences may involve grief, trauma, regret, or pain. The goal is not to force disclosure or make someone relive something they are not ready to discuss. You can leave room by saying, "You do not have to answer if it feels too personal." It is also important to listen without trying to fix, judge, or compare their experience with your own. Their story should remain centered on what it meant to them. People often remember those who helped them make sense of their past. When someone explains how an experience changed them, they may discover patterns, strengths, or wounds they had never clearly named. Your question becomes memorable because it did not simply ask what happened. It asked who they became afterward. Respect their time and boundaries. Respecting someone's time and boundaries means showing interest without acting entitled to constant access. In dating, attraction becomes safer and stronger when both people know they can have responsibilities, private moments, and personal limits without being punished for them. This may mean accepting that they cannot always reply immediately, asking before calling unexpectedly, or understanding when they need rest instead of conversation. It also means paying attention when they say they are uncomfortable, unavailable, or not ready to discuss something. This works because respect reduces emotional pressure. When someone knows they can say, "Not now, I need space," or "I would rather not talk about that," without facing anger, guilt, or withdrawal, they become more comfortable being honest with you. They no longer have to invent excuses to protect themselves. The strongest form of respect appears in behavior, not promises. Saying that you understand boundaries means little if you keep pushing after they have answered. Accepting a limit calmly shows emotional maturity and communicates that their comfort matters as much as your desire. However, respecting boundaries does not mean ignoring your own needs. If someone repeatedly gives very little time, avoids communication, or keeps the relationship unclear, you are allowed to decide that the connection does not work for you. Mutual respect protects both people. People remember how you responded when they could not give you what you wanted. If you remained kind, steady, and self-respecting instead of becoming controlling, your presence may become associated with emotional safety. Respect makes someone feel valued as a complete person, not treated like a source of attention that must always remain available. Believe in them before success arrives. Believing in someone before success arrives means recognizing their potential while the outcome is still uncertain. In dating, many people receive praise only after they achieve something visible. Everyone appears once the promotion, award, breakthrough, or public victory makes belief feel safe. Far fewer people offer encouragement during the quiet stage when doubt is louder than proof. A message like, "I can see how seriously you are building this, even if no one else sees the result yet," can feel deeply powerful. It tells the person that your confidence is not based only on applause. You notice the discipline, courage, and persistence that exist before recognition arrives. This works because the beginning of any meaningful journey can feel lonely. People may question their ability, compare themselves with others, or fear that their effort will lead nowhere. When someone calmly reflects belief during that uncertain period, the words can become emotional support they return to later. The strongest belief is grounded in evidence. Mention the preparation you have seen, the way they recover from setbacks, or the strength they continue showing. Empty promises such as, "You will definitely succeed," may sound comforting, but can feel unrealistic. Honest encouragement says, "I cannot guarantee the outcome, but I believe you have what it takes to keep moving." However, belief should not become pressure. The person should not feel that they must succeed to protect your image of them. Make it clear that their worth remains even if the result changes. People rarely forget who believed in them when there was nothing impressive to point at yet. Your words may stay with them because you recognize the person they were becoming before the world had proof. End chats at an emotional high to stay memorable. Ending a conversation at its emotional high means stepping away while the exchange still feels exciting, warm, funny, or meaningful. Instead of continuing until the energy fades and both people run out of things to say, you leave when the connection feels strongest. This creates a powerful memory because the mind often judges an experience by its emotional peak and final moment. In dating, many conversations begin with curiosity but slowly lose intensity through unnecessary replies. A lively exchange becomes repetitive, then ends with dry messages such as, "Okay, good night," or "talk later." The person may remember the boredom at the end more clearly than the excitement that came before it. Leaving at the right moment changes that emotional imprint. When someone is laughing, opening up, or clearly enjoying your attention, a warm ending preserves the feeling. You might say that you enjoyed hearing their story and need to continue later. The conversation ends, but the emotional experience remains unfinished in their mind. This can make them replay what was said, wonder what comes next, and look forward to hearing from you again. The effect is not created by suddenly disappearing, ignoring them, or using silence as punishment. Those behaviors create anxiety rather than genuine attraction. The key is to leave with warmth and clarity. You are not withholding affection. You are protecting the quality of the interaction. When every conversation ends only after the energy is exhausted, your presence can become associated with emotional effort. When it ends while both people still feel engaged, your presence becomes linked with anticipation, pleasure, and curiosity. People often miss the feeling someone created more than the person's exact words. Ending on a high note allows that feeling to remain active long after the final message has been sent. Leave a story unfinished to create curiosity. Leaving a story unfinished means introducing something interesting, emotional, or unexpected without revealing every detail at once. In dating conversations, this creates curiosity because the human mind naturally dislikes incomplete information. When someone hears the beginning of a compelling story but does not receive the ending, their attention remains attached to it. You might mention that something unusual happened during your day, that a certain place reminds you of an unforgettable experience, or that you once made a decision that completely changed your life. Instead of explaining everything immediately, you allow the story to pause naturally and save the most meaningful part for another conversation. This works because unfinished experiences create mental tension. The person may continue wondering what happened, how the situation ended, or what the story reveals about you. Even after the conversation stops, the unanswered question can keep returning to their mind. Your message is no longer just another text. It becomes an open loop they feel drawn to complete. However, curiosity should never be created through lies, exaggerated drama, or emotional manipulation. Saying something alarming and then refusing to explain can make the other person feel anxious rather than attracted. The story should feel playful, intriguing, or personal, not threatening or deliberately confusing. The key is to give enough information to make the story worth remembering while holding back only the natural ending. You might say, "That reminds me of the strangest mistake I ever made while traveling, but that story deserves more than one rushed message." When used carefully, an unfinished story makes future conversations feel anticipated rather than forced. The person has a reason to return, ask another question, and mentally revisit the moment because part of the emotional experience still feels incomplete. Recall small details to make people feel remembered. Recalling small details means remembering the little things someone mentioned and bringing them up naturally later. In dating, this can create a powerful emotional effect because most people are used to being heard only on the surface. When you remember a favorite snack, an important meeting, a childhood memory, or the name of their pet, it shows that their words stayed with you. This matters because attention is one of the clearest signals of emotional interest. People often forget long conversations, but they remember the moment someone proved they were truly listening. A simple message like, "How did that presentation go?" can feel more meaningful than a generic compliment because it shows consistent care rather than temporary excitement. The brain connects remembered details with emotional safety. When someone notices what matters to you, you feel less invisible. You begin to associate that person with comfort, recognition, and importance. This is why small details can build closeness faster than dramatic gestures. They make the connection feel personal. However, the detail should be recalled naturally. Repeating everything someone says or tracking personal information too closely can feel forced or invasive. The goal is not to prove that you remember every word. It is to show that certain things mattered enough to stay in your mind. You might remember that they dislike crowded places, love rainy mornings, or were nervous about visiting a family member. Bringing it up later shows emotional continuity. It tells them the conversation did not disappear the moment the phone was put down. People are drawn to those who make them feel memorable. When you recall a small detail with warmth, you quietly communicate, "I noticed you, I listened, and what you shared mattered to me."